Let's go.
Right.
Get it up, you can.
So, just so I'm clear, you both met at the Whisky Shop?
Yes.
Which one?
Victoria Street.
Whisky Shop.
I had no idea that they were shagging, by the way. I worked with them both and thought
We did it.
not very often I was up in Victoria Street, to be honest.
We hit it what we thought very well.
It turns out not actually. So
No.
you're just oblivious.
No,
Are you okay for
that's
us to
fair.
just kick left?
Crack on. Why not?
That's,
At this stage, it's all out.
Right,
so
well-
that's Andy might have known, I guess. I just wasn't up there very often. Plus, also, I was 18, didn't know what sex was.
Right, Ross, you know what to do. Clap us in.
I don't know, like, how do you do? I just like to do this. That's not loud enough.
Welcome along to the Whisky Stories podcast with myself, Graham Cogar. We are back in the Athletic Arms, in the tiny little room, sandwiched nicely between the bar and the gents' toilets. Ross, our big pal Angus, he's no here tonight.
I know, it's the first time we've not complained about being absolutely crammed in this room, although we do have 4 people in this wee room tonight.
Certainly do. Well, I've got a wee joke for you. A Canadian and an Australian walk into a bar in Edinburgh on Guy Fawkes night and they end up doing a whisky podcast.
That's worked out alright.
We do have Tom and Monique here. Welcome along to the Whisky Stories podcast.
Thank you, Vanna.
Thank you.
Just been blinded by Monique's diamond ring that she's got on her finger.
Wow.
Congratulations are in order, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
First couple to ever decide to celebrate an engagement by coming on the Whisky Stories podcast, so welcome along. I'd love to say you're the first, but actually we've had quite a few whisky couples on the podcast.
I think every independent bottler, new independent bottler you've had on, have ended up being a couple, so whether it's been Tricara,
Well, they're not a couple.
Woodrow's of Edinburgh, and Fragrant Drops.
Yeah.
Do we just need to start a bottler? Is that what's
Perhaps.
happening?
Well,
I think that's what they're saying.
That's it. I
yeah.
think we'll get to come all the way back round to that, I guess. But we are here in Diggers, the Athletic Arms, our favourite pub in the world. What are you dramming, Graham?
Right, so I've gone for. It's always great. Kev always sticks up a wee post on Instagram to let everybody know what he's got in.
He's taking a photo on a potato this week. He's put a photo up.
I've not seen that actually. But actually, what I have to say, big shout out to Kev, is Kev. I was speaking to Kev.
It's the worst quality photo I've ever seen from him.
That was shocking.
I was speaking to Kev last week about. Obviously, we were in, and he says, "Oh, how are you getting on?" I told him we're actually recording. It's because he always says who you got in, coming in. So he likes to try and get some stock in and stuff like that. So we've got whiskey to talk about and stuff. And I said, "Oh, we're doing our episode 52. It's our big recording. You, Angus, and myself, just chatting away, going through some of the highlights." Oh, I said, "You actually feature quite a bit because we've got the clips up. I'll need to listen back to that." So he's messaged me about 2 or 3 days later, saying, "Just listens to that. Absolutely fantastic. Some great memories. Really enjoyed that. Thanks very much. Also, think I'm going to need to add a sample tax onto you guys." Because he's heard about some of the great whiskies that people have brought in. I think the White Oak 24
The Dario brought in, the Glengoyne 24, yeah.
He was like, "I'm really not happy that I didn't get a chance to sample that." So, Kev, if you're listening, all samples have since been stopped. We ask all our guests not to bring in any more samples.
For the visual, for the viewers, you've got about 8 samples on your table right now.
But Kev put up an Ardnamurchan, 2 Ardnamurchans, an Ardnamurchan 10. Now I believe the Ardnamurchan 10 was what everybody was ranting and raving about at the Whisky Fringe.
Okay.
And I've decided to go side by side because.
So, yeah, at Whisky Fringe, it was an Adelphi Ardnamurchan 10 that won the weekend Dram of the Week.
Yeah.
This is the first ever official bottling of Ardnamurchan 10.
Yes, thank you for that, Ross.
Good
Job you're here. I always said somebody knows what they're talking about. But basically, having the 2 side by side, I have to admit, I snuck into the Athletic Arms on Sunday afternoon. My wife is not listening. She knew I was coming here, but I just thought, you know what, a nice bit of tranquil time to reflect on the end of a busy week. And I thought, I'll have a pint, and I saw that they had this. I don't know whether the pint had gone to my head or the whiskey had gone to my head, but I came back with this Ardnamurchan Sherry Cask Release and said, I think I'd like to, it's one of the few whiskies I'll say is I'd like to fill a bathtub with that whiskey and bathe in it.
When you put this in the chat, I couldn't believe you've never had such a strong opinion on a dram before.
Yeah, it's not something that I've often done. I like all whiskey, or most of it, especially now that I've managed to open my mind up to the peated stuff. But I think, I don't know what it is about this. It's an absolute cracking dram. Maybe we'll do a sniff it, sip it, score it for it I don't know if we're in search of the perfect 10 out of 10. I don't know if it'll hit the 10 out of 10, but it'll certainly be up
That's
there.
it. You put in the chat. By the way, lads, I've had Ardnamurchan and Sherry last night. It's fucking glorious. This is what you said. And I thought to myself, wow, that's
There's a tasting note.
That's it. That's a great tasting note. And so I have ordered an Ardnamurchan 10 for me to have tonight as well, because I've not had it before. And then I've got a Tricara 33-year-old North British.
In fact, that was number one on the lineup they did for their Indie Bottler Spotlight, and it has to be said that there's very few places left where you can get hold of that bottle.
Yeah.
It was one of the first bottles that they had which they completely managed to sell out. And one of the things we were saying as well, it's never really happened before, and Angus and I did point out that Angus had it 2 weeks before the Indie Bottler Spotlight on the podcast, so we're claiming...
So he was taking all the plaudits.
Total claiming that, but I tell you...
I would too.
I've watched it back. I was out today. I was actually in a little bit of heaven today as we're recording this on the 5th of November. There's a company that invited me in to have a look at their bottling plant, and it was incredible to watch all the different styles that they have. And I'm standing there and I'm thinking, oh, this is great, and they're telling me about these people, and then suddenly I spotted it. I says, is that a Tricara bottle there? Oh yeah, we know Ryan and Ola, we bottle for them. I says, oh, fantastic, I know them really well. And I looked closer, and my heart took a little extra skip there, because it was a 27-year-old Bowmore. It was the fun. I don't know whether it was a bottle. What I will say is it was a sample bottle, obviously, in terms of it was their bottling, but I think the labels were slightly off, so it might be something that's put through. It might not have been the 27 in there, it might have just been whiskey in there, but they were just making sure the labelling was right. But I don't know what it was about that one. With that, Ola gave us a sample of that at the Edinburgh Whisky Festival, and it absolutely hit the spot.
I was gutted that I didn't try that.
27-year-old
bourbon Bowmore, wasn't it?
Yeah, refill bourbon, just incredible, and definitely worth a try and a sample when it comes out. I don't know whether it's going to be out before Christmas or whether it'll be after Christmas, but fantastic. But
hopefully after. Someone I can't buy you any more Christmas presents.
so obviously, we'll get into your careers and stuff as well. But how many?
What have you guys got?
How many bottles of whiskies have you got at home actually between you?
The official number, or the
doesn't...
number that doesn't include all the ones in the cupboard and in the closet and the duplicates.
It's flat full of whiskey.
165.
That's a pretty good sample room.
It's all right.
The
shelves look okay.
And what have you went for tonight?
This is a Murray McDavid Glengarry. I can't remember what cask it's in.
In a weird wine cask.
In a weird wine cask, which is, exactly what I like.
Shout out to David Lyons, who listens to the podcast, drinks in here, and is an absolute Glengarry obsessive.
Oh yeah.
Glengarry till I die.
Oh, loves it. Absolutely loves it.
It's a Saint Julien wineberry.
Interesting.
I almost exclusively did it because one of my co-workers despises Glengarry more than anything in the
really?
world, and I love proving her wrong.
Nice.
There we go.
But,
fantastic.
Yeah.
That probably brings on to a good point. So, of course, we've got you on the Whisky Stories podcast because you talk about whiskey for a living, both of you.
I do.
And I've known you both for, I guess, about 6 years. When I was 19, working at the Whisky Shop.
Working the door, security.
That's it. I would occasionally go up to Victoria Street, which was kind of slightly more successful shop at the time. Still the most successful shop actually. And I'd go up to that shop and learn from Andy, who is somebody actually I've never shouted out in the podcast before, but he was an amazing kind of wealth of knowledge. He gave me a lot of time when I was really, really new in the industry. And you both worked there.
Yep.
Tom, you were full-time, Monique, you were part-time.
Yes, I was.
Before we even go into how good I was to work with and all that back in the Whisky Shop, you're Australian, Tom.
I am.
And Monique, you're Canadian.
Yes, indeed.
Right. Well, who do we start with? We'll start ladies first. And because you've been in Scotland for longer as well.
I have, yes.
How did your interest in whiskey start, Monique? And then how did you end up coming over to Scotland?
Well, they're technically unrelated, those two questions. I came to Scotland originally for archaeology and to go to school here. While studying here for my master's originally, I was like, well, I can't go to Scotland and not at least try to like whiskey. And I did a little sort of at home tasting with a little mini pack of actually Bowmore 12, 15, 18. And I remember like I was expecting to hate it because all of my experience with whiskey before that was like shooting Johnny Walker unwillingly in a bar. And I remember having the first sip and going, oh, that's pretty nice.
Yeah.
And then I tried the next one and I was like, oh, that's even nicer. And so on and so forth. So, so kind of discovered that I liked it. And
happened to come to Scotland to study archaeology anyway.
Yeah, so it was sort of serendipitous. And then, I needed a job as a poor PhD student in 2018, 2019. And I was like, I've never worked in retail before, but a job came up for weekend cover at the Whisky Shop, and I was like, I can do that, probably. I talk endlessly anyways, so might as well talk about whiskey. And and I'm still there.
And Tim, it's just, sorry to interrupt you, but how annoying was Ross to work with? Because I've heard so many people have talked about how annoying Ross was when he was a youngster, keen on his early journey into whiskey, learning, and wanting to impart that knowledge as much as possible on people.
I mean, without trying to sound too brown nosy, he was genuinely one of the nicest people in the world to come across.
Cut that bit out.
The problem is, I knew fuck all about whiskey back then, so I couldn't have been a big-headed arsehole. I couldn't have been, because genuinely I just wanted to learn. And I remember, for example, the first time I met Monique. Okay, Monique, how tall are you, Monique? Like
5'0".
5 foot Canadian. Been studying in Scotland. Said you had an interest in whiskey, and I said, so what kind of whiskey do you drink? And keep in mind, it turns out that I'm a wee fairy. I drank floral, easygoing, mainly bourbon cask, Speyside whiskies. And you started, well, obviously Octomore's something we always have and all that. And you were a massive peat fiend.
Yeah.
That's what I'm going to
Really?
tell you.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. And I would say probably my first time interacting with somebody who their favourite style of whiskey at the time anyway was, it has to be peated. I really love something as dirty as possible. Yeah. And I was like, that's really interesting. And I think that was eye-opening for me because, again, I couldn't even at that point really understand how people could pick notes out of Lafroig and out of Ardbeg and say, well, I like Ardbeg in this cask, or have you tried this single cask? We've done a lot of work with Hunter Lang, also we've had on the podcast as well. He used to get all these single casks of the Ardmores and all these different things. I was never interested. And you always warmed to them. So I would say it was really interesting to work with somebody that I perhaps, if I judged a book by its cover, I would never have assumed. And it turns out that I might as well being the stereotypical 5 foot Canadian girl, and you might.
Well, it has been said in the podcast that Ross will go for a Japanese slipper cocktail.
That's true. That is true.
I mean, I've tried it. We were on a stag do not long after recording that episode.
I don't know how I'm going to. But I admit to being.
Well, I mean, we were been on a stag do, and we were sort of, it was the first day of a stag do, and we entered a bar, and it's one of those ones where it's like, God, we've really started early here, and we'll get to the sort of 5-6 o'clock-ish. Do I want another pint, or what am I going to have? And we do cocktails, so it's like, what's your order, Graham? I says, ask them if they'll do a Japanese slipper, please. And then I had to go and explain what the ingredients are. Am I right in saying Maduri, Cointreau, lemon juice, served with a slice of lemon?
It's basically citrus, sugar and Maduri.
Yeah.
That does sound good.
Bright
and I tell you, it annoyed me how nice it was. I was like, damn, I wish I didn't address it.
You should feel guilty when you drink it. You do feel guilty when you drink it, but you have more than one.
Exactly.
So that's still the case, and so I always thought that was really interesting. And also, you're still at the Whisky Shop now, so now the amount of whiskies you'll have tried in that Victoria Street shop, but people don't know. It's a tiny, tiny little shop up there.
Barely bigger than this room, to be honest.
Yeah.
So wait a minute, because we've got the ginger boy who usually works on the podcast. He's our
he's at Maltrees Walk.
He's our intern producer. So for the listeners, the Whisky Shop has 2 locations, 2 stores at 3. Right. Okay. So I know the one.
Maybe for our listeners, Monique, could you just break down the Whisky Shop a bit for people that don't know about it?
Well, so. Company line. We're the largest brick and mortar whiskey retailer in the UK. I think we've got almost probably 25 shops now.
Or just opened in Cardiff and stuff as well.
Cardiff, Exeter. Exeter was last month. We're opening.
Second shop coming up in France.
2 shops in France. We've got a new one coming up in Glasgow. Going to be in St Andrew's Square, I believe. Or Square. But here in Edinburgh is where the Whisky Shop started, at Waverley Market, which is where you were. That location is still open, but now we've got Victoria Street and Maltrees Walk as well.
Wow.
But we all sort of focus on different things. So I would say at Victoria Street we do a lot more of single casks, sort of niche distilleries, small batch type things. We do have those in the other shops as well, but Waverley Market, a little bit more of your distillery bottlings.
Official bottlings will be
Official.
So whereabouts Victoria? So about my geography of Edinburgh then.
So Victoria Street, you've got to know Victoria Street, Graham, right by the castle.
Diagonally
Colourful
opposite
Street,
Bow Bar.
the Bow Bar,
know,
you
yeah,
know,
right.
and so that's your American tourists.
Well, I was going to say,
Yeah.
It's your bread and butter tourists that are coming to experience Edinburgh for the first time. They come in and Monique says, well, why don't you buy something you can't get back home?
yeah.
And then basically you can give them samples, see what they think, and they'll end up picking something miraculous. And that's how that tiny shop does an amazing amount of
Well,
business.
here's a question then, Monique, without divulging too much information if you're allowed to, but tell me, what's one of the best days you've had working there where somebody's walked out, or a few people you've brought in a fair amount of money, sold a fair amount of whiskey?
I honestly would say that it's not necessarily the amount of money. It is really more if you just have a really, really great chat with somebody,
Yeah.
and you know that they are just absolutely chuffed with the bottle that they've got and that they're going to really, really enjoy it.
But then also she sold a Banff.
That was going to be my answer.
Right, a band right.
Well, I remember the only good bottle I ever sold in Victoria Street was a Banff 40 Old and Rare Hunter
I
Lag.
What's
remember,
that? What's
I
that?
miss and remember it well.
That's a Banff is the Highland distillery that's closed, and it was $2,000 a bottle.
Yes, I mean, and this is what fascinates me is the
Many
fact.
years ago now.
Yeah,
Not
that-
$2,000 a bottle
That's
for
it,
a
it was a $2,000
40-year-old
bottle when I was
anymore.
19 in there, and I sold it to a Scotsman that was about to move to Dubai.
Yeah.
That's what I remember. That's
It's fascinating.
It's
like,
funny how you remember, but also the people you meet, the people you speak to in that little shop,
Yeah.
all corners of the globe.
Yeah.
Well, I think one of a customer that I've had that has now come back multiple times. He's from the United States, and he will come in once or twice a year, and he normally ships like 12 bottles back to the US. And the first time that he was in, he has part of a whiskey club in California, and he ended up buying 2 cases worth of a single cask Benriach PX cask.
Yeah.
And
I remember that because he opened a bottle in the shop
Yeah.
and shared it amongst the staff. That was
Amazing.
incredible.
speaking, I'm not supposed to do that.
Sorry.
well, that's what you heard. But
I wasn't there. It's all hearsay.
He went outside, opened it, tried it,
Yeah.
came back, and
try this.
Is it-
Bloody brilliant.
Isn't that so interesting though?
Yeah.
And so you obviously must still love it, and the team up there.
oh yeah. It's it's definitely changed quite a bit over the years, but we've actually got some really great people with us now. Not necessarily everybody that started off maybe wanting to be in the industry,
Yeah.
but more just looking for a job. But I think a lot of them, I think it's something about, I mean, certainly Andy, that's our GM up there, he's great with the whiskey and everything. So we have sort of cultivated a lot of interest, and you have people that really do know at least about the bottles that we stock, maybe
Yeah.
not so much about some of the other
So
ones.
this gentleman Andy, that's the general manager at Victoria Street, his favourite distillery is Glenlossie.
Right,
And,
okay.
you know, so I always love to remember trying Charles Kerr. I always think, why does he like Glen Talkers?
Talkers.
And it was always Glenlossie with
Yeah.
Andy. It was Glenlossie and bourbon. It was Glenlossie, don't ruin it.
Who's the
that's
guy?
kind of thing you say.
Who's the guy up at Royal Mile Whiskies, and he's got a favourite whiskey? Is it not Glen Elgin?
Oh yeah, what
Yeah.
Jolly Topper talked about.
It's
This guy who
fascinating
loved
how you can
Glen
get-
Elgin 12 and
that
reckons he
hard?
sold the most Glen Elgin 12 in the world because anybody came in for any bottle of whiskey, he was selling them a Glen
I mean,
Elgin
it's
12.
funny. Like, I'm not at that stage where I'm obsessed with one single distillery, really. But at the same time, there's something quite nice and romantic about somebody just absolutely upset. Like we were just talking about David Lyons at Glengarry. It's got to be in Glengarry. It's like I'm absolutely in love with it. So now tell me, Monique, then it's an interesting one because you talk about like the conversations that you have with people and walking in and stuff like that. But I can imagine that when at certain times of the year, particularly during like Edinburgh festival times when places are busy and stuff, how difficult is it to cut through the mild peruser that's coming in and going, oh, I'm just having a little look, and then you realise these guys aren't going to buy anything, to coin a phrase, because my background is sort of sales, tyre kickers.
Yeah.
I like to come in, have a little look around, a wee chat, a blether, and then walk out again without walking out with a bag, clinking the bottles, versus, because I suppose there's two sides to it. There'll be a lot of people that walk into the shop that are there to buy whiskey.
Yes.
And then it's about your job just to try and see what whiskey suits them. But then also, is it a case of if somebody walks in the shop and they're maybe not sure, is it to try and get them to walk out with something in their carrier bag?
Yeah, I think we're quite lucky in that we do our own little single cask bottlings. We bottle them in small sizes as well. So if people are sort of just browsing, maybe you can kind of start the conversation by going like, oh, this, let me tell you about what these are, and sort of talking about some of those bottles there. And they're very eye-catching. We've got these sort of little wooden barrels.
Glenkeir treasures.
They are now called cask treasures because Glenkeir confused people.
Okay.
So yes, we have rebranded. They're just cask treasures now. But yes, you've got these little single cask bottlings, and that was always a really good way of sort of going, you're welcome to give these a taste, see what you like. So generally, a lot of people would end up, even if it was just a small bottle, they'd buy something. And I think because our shop is so small, when it's really busy like that, if you're just wasting time, you just don't want to be in there because it's too small. It's too cramped, and you can't really sort of peruse the shelves.
So the honest answer is, after 6 years of retail, they see you coming from a mile away.
Yeah, I just think what samples have you got? Now, at what point was it when you're there and in walks this tall, dark, handsome, dreamy Aussie bloke that you just think, oh, I'll have a bit of that.
Hilariously, she was completely oblivious to me for about the first few months.
Well, this is probably a good point to start on Tom then. We can marry that, but we can come back to that. If we start okay, one last question, I guess, for Monique as well. Is it just Scotch whisky you drink, or you a little bit of everything?
I'm not big on. I'm actually Canadian whiskey. I'm not a big fan of at all. At least the ones that I've had, and that might more be because of experiences in my youth with overindulging in Crown Royal. To name a few. Well,
drink responsibly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Although Crown Royal with orange juice, great.
Ooh.
So good.
Whiskey and orange juice.
Yeah, it's really good, honestly. It's called a Gladiator.
Like a
Don't know why.
I will say the worst hangover I've ever had in whiskey was on Crown Royal Green Apple.
Wow.
Which of course wouldn't be legal here in Scotland to call
No.
whiskey, but in northern rural Michigan it's what you'll take.
It's quite good, actually.
And they don't really measure. So again, I feel like in Canada, anything above most of the population of Canada, I feel like you order a whiskey, you get like a half pint most of the time.
Just so polite and generous.
Yeah, well that's it, right? That's it. They'll apologise for pouring you too much, I guess.
No, some of the flavoured ones are good.
And so I guess we can talk more when we hear Tom's story about now visiting distilleries and everything as well. So an Australian also moved to Scotland.
I did.
How did your interest in whiskey start, Tom?
It was one of those. I kind of always had a passing interest in being into whiskey. Sort of that. I always wanted to want to like whiskey. So
you wanted to be snobby.
I wanted to be a snob. Yeah, I had it was like in Australia the selection was fairly limited, but I thought I was really up on my stuff when I was buying Green Label instead of Blue Label because Green Label's clearly the better option, and I'm saving the money. But
very Scottish attitude.
Right. But no, so whiskey was a complete accident for me, to be honest. I moved over here.
Which part of Australia were you from? Sorry.
Sydney.
Sydney.
Yeah. And it was too hot, so I got sick of it and moved over. But it was a complete accident falling into the whiskey shop, really, because I came over here, needed a job. I ended up with a job at an undisclosed pizza place for 3 weeks, hated my life for the entirety of it, and was looking for anything that was going, and a job came up at the whiskey shop that was full-time. Applied for it. I've always worked in retail. I thought, I know nothing about whiskey. I know what I like. I drink Green Label. But got the job at Victoria Street. and it was kind of, I think, learning from the likes of Andy and Monique and Ross, and just sort of, the full-timers that were there at the time, like Lindsay and David as well, were really big on that. And it was just going, this industry is amazing.
Yeah.
And there's so much to it.
And how long were you at Victoria Street for?
So I was there for 2 years, just over 2 years.
Yeah.
But a good half of that was lockdown. So I was technically with the company for 2 years, but I was probably only working for 14 months of that.
Oh, really? Okay.
But yeah, so that was I was the sort of sole survivor of the when everyone went on furlough, and then they had to sort of cut the staff down. And it would have been genuine. It would have actually been Monique, but Monique was part-time, and they needed a full-time.
I think you literally, if I remember correctly, you can only do a certain amount of hours on your visa, for example.
Yeah, so initially on a student visa you can only work 20 hours.
Yeah, and I remember that being the case.
So when it comes to joining a company like the Whisky Shop and things like that, do they put you through any kind of training before you get thrust in?
Kind of train on the job, don't you?
Yeah, it very much was. It was that level of, like, I went in under the assumption of I know how to serve customers, but I don't know the product.
Yeah.
And it was very much at the time of going. I started in July, so a month before Edinburgh Fringe.
Wow.
And it was very much, you're going to learn or you're going to leave. And that was it. Having the staff members that we had there allowed me to learn on the job, and it was that, and just going, okay, I'll find out about the cask that they've got, the cask treasures that they've got. I'll find out about that. That's 5 whiskies. I can repeat until I'm good at it, and then if somebody asks me a different question, I can find out.
Yeah.
And do you guys sell those cool little decanters that are shaped in little sort of? Do you sell them? They're great.
He's the worst, isn't he?
We do not.
You don't do this?
Yes, you do.
No, we don't.
Oh,
They certainly used
Do
to.
you not do like little golf club decanters or golf
There used
ball
to be one that was
decanters?
messy. It just looked like a shite.
Waverley does now.
One in the shape of a football that we got in a week after the Six Nations ended, so that was great timing.
A rugby ball, you mean?
Yeah, rugby.
Yeah, sorry. I know what you meant. Sorry, we've got a lot of international listeners.
Yeah, no, we don't have them. We do have them as a company, but Waverley stocks those, not us.
Great,
We're
thanks,
highbrow.
Yeah, that's typical that you would ask for that. Do you have those golf clubs full of nondescript blended whiskey? That's 30 quid more than it should be.
The Edinburgh Castle is what it
Yes,
is.
we have
Oh, that one, okay, that one was good. It came in a wooden box.
Yeah, little wooden box, a glass bottle in the shape of Edinburgh Castle with a nondescript.
No,
I'll be honest with you, right? Like, there's such a fine line between. I'll say this. I did the West Highland Way maybe 7 or 8 years ago. Did it to save money, and it cost me more money. and I looked around at that time, and I thought, God, we love ripping off tourists. Like, so when everyone says like, "Oh, do a staycation, it's the best thing you'll do, you'll save money," and this, that, and the next thing, rubbish, right? I had a miserable night in a tent in Dornoch, not Dornoch, sorry, Durness, which resulted in us bailing out and sleeping in the car at 2 a.m. Locked the door. Because my keys kept automatically locking the car, which would then set the alarm off when we were moving in the car. It woke the whole place up. But it was Dornoch visited. And I just remember, and maybe it's changed now and what have you, and I just remember being there and thinking like, God,
Scottish people are the worst.
we genuinely really do.
We're saying this in Australia and he decided to move. And seemed reasonably happy.
But
What have I done?
But we talked about this, Ross, about like the Scotch whisky experiences. I'll be the first to admit, and the Scotch whisky experience have been great for us on the podcast. We do have free tickets that we are still to use. We've had a lot of people who've worked for them and still work there. Ali Baxter, to give a shout out, and loads and loads of other people there. And I always turned my nose up at the Scotch whisky experience because I was like, Royal Mile, whiskey, rip off. They're just going to be there. But then you turn out that actually the shop, the bar, everything is about
A great experience all over.
So then, from my own perspective, is like you look at these whiskey shops and you look at these places and you're like, nah, because I know it's going to be a place where it's a tourist trap.
Yeah.
But at the same time,
You go
having
in,
spent a little bit of time with the Ginger Boy and going into the Maltrees Walk shop, and you look at the whiskey that's there, and there's the W Club as well, if I'm right in saying.
Yes. So we've got a wee club where we do tastings and things.
a lot of the tastings are always up on Victoria Street as well.
Yeah.
Yeah,
actually.
well, we went to the Balvenie tasting at the shop.
Maltrees,
Maltrees.
Last
And then
2 months ago.
A couple of months ago, and then Ross got ejected from the Glen Turret one for chucking his glass in it.
Yeah. Monique actually just believes you there.
Ross dropped his glass and he was given a
It was a
plastic
big rugby player presenting. I was very intimidated.
But
You're right, and
like-
you go in and you need to give it a chance. Is
Yeah.
I guess is what you're saying.
But it's how complex is it? Like we talked about this with Cam and Fraser and all the other guys we've had from Scotch on, Eduardo and things, and it must be dead easy when you have the Macallan up there and you'll get people that walk in
I'm just yell Hal McAllen.
without being an American tourist, without being a sort of cliche like, yeah, I like the Macallan and stuff, but then being able to go, right, well, hang on a minute, because something I learned very quickly from watching Cameron at work is this guy walks in, American guy, what would you like to drink, sir? I'd like a scotch. He's like, well, you're in the right place. Go over 300 bottles. Secondly, he said, right, well, what do you normally like? I like Dalmore, I like Macallan. Shock.
Yeah.
Right, so basically
Never heard that before.
Yeah, and then he said, right, ever tried Tamdu? Never heard of the Tamdu.
Yeah.
Right, well, if you like that, you like that. There's a good chance you're going to like this. And that guy walks out there going, I've tried a Tamdu. I'm now a little bit higher. When I go back, I can tell all the folks back home.
It's true.
Tamdu is what you want to drink, by the way.
Yeah.
So for you guys then, when you're doing, like, it's interesting, Tom, we'll come to you with what you're doing at Cadenheads, because I think it's slightly different with what people are walking in to buy. But at the Whisky Shop then, is it just dead easy to go, right, you want a Macallan, I've got this range, here's what you've got, and you're going to spend a lot of money? Or are you wanting to maybe consult them a little bit more and go, actually, I can save you a bit of money and get you a really good Drams?
Yeah, it depends on maybe what the person's kind of spending power is, what they're after, but definitely there will be, like, at the moment, we just got in last week a Secret Speyside, which is a bourbon cask 15-year-old that's been bottled by Signatory but from Macallan.
Mm-hmm.
So it's very different from the sort of standard. If you like Macallan, it's not going to be the same, but
I think it sort of depends on their interest as well.
Yeah.
Though,
Yeah.
right? It's if they're willing to sit there and listen to you for 2 seconds, you can get them onto something more interesting.
Yeah.
But if they just come in and point, then then that's
So that's what I'd argue. I would say that, well, I guess we'll get into Cadenheads. The advantage of going to a place like Cadenheads is that your audience are generally more informed.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
what
And the challenge of working at the Whisky Shop is it's an incredibly diverse and unpredictable audience every single day.
Mm-hmm.
You will get people who are serious collectors who come in. You get a lot more regulars as well that are going to go into somewhere at the Whisky Shop and only that specific shop.
Well,
for example.
if you've got this American that's coming over and taking cases home with them and stuff like that, then I mean, I'm assuming
It's
that
the same
also.
with everywhere. They want to deal with the same person. They like that customer service.
Yeah.
It's personalised. This day, I can't wait to speak to Monique again. And maybe Monique's put a bottle aside from them because they got something in. It's not going to last very long. They go, do you know what? They're going to buy that next time they're in, and that's all that
See,
personalised
there's that really
service,
nice
isn't it?
feeling about and again, it is that nice feeling. It's like what you were saying about drinking the green label instead of this label and stuff like that. But being able to say, I've got a whiskey guy. Like I know I've got. Listen, I'll phone my whiskey person and they'll be able to tell me and stuff like that. But what's really interested me, and I don't want to probe too much on this, but like I say, a background in sales and stuff like that. There's obviously targets, and you've got to try and hit things and things like that. But then in the whiskey industry, trying to have that sort of just as long as you're someone's walking out with whiskey, that's a bonus. How difficult is it where you can say, right, well, I could sell you this, and it's going to that's great for the shop. But from a customer experience, I could say, do you know what? I think you would want that, but at the same time, if you open your mind a little bit more, or even, I can save you a bit of money here. I mean, how's that work?
I think we are quite lucky in that we are such a busy shop. We have a little bit more leeway with things like targets, and generally I think the more important thing is for them to go away with like the right bottle for them, even if it's the cheaper bottle, the less expensive
It's
one.
all about that. You get one-off experience for you, isn't it?
Yeah.
Somebody
And
giving you
there was never any when I was there, and I believe it's still the same. There was never any sales pressure.
No.
It was
Yeah.
very much more about the right bottle for the right customer, and there's also no commission.
Yeah.
So there's no
Yeah.
incentive.
There's no pressure. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's not bad if someone opens a bottle outside the shop and comes back.
That certainly doesn't happen
It's all well and
every
good.
day.
It's great for the shop, and it's a great feeling when somebody buys the £2,000 Banff. But it doesn't affect your
No, of
wallet,
course.
so you'd rather them have the right
So
bottle.
that's what I'll say. My answer to your question, Graham, would be it's just the pressures of working in sales aren't really as prevalent in working in whiskey retail, because you're working in whiskey retail, it's genuinely customising it to the customer's needs rather than to your needs. And so there was a situation when I was at the Whisky Shop, the only independent bottle they stocked was Hunter Lang. All the Hunter Lang bottles were exclusive to them, and the only independent bottle in shelf space was Hunter Lang. And therefore, of course, we had better margin on Hunter Lang. So in theory, if you could tell everybody Hunter Lang, that would be better. But it never really came into your thinking. It would be if somebody wants single cask whiskey, that's what they were going to get, because that was the only option.
Yeah.
Now they mentioned these signatories, and they've had so many signatory 17 Speyside M's in the last year or so, and how good they've been. And actually then it comes down to the quality of the liquid. And the one thing you've got in the Whisky Shop is an almost in-your-face, constant, amazing new liquid going on the shelves.
Yeah.
And lots of exclusives as well.
And honestly, it must be really tricky for the Whisky Shop, because being as large as they are, then I can imagine, like we had Hector McLean from Jeffrey Street Whisky and Tobacco on, and he was talking about and he just said off camera and off when we stopped recording, he was like, you should see the samples that we get every single week from people who say, like, could you stock whiskey?
Yeah.
We've only got so much shelf space. But when you think about it from your point of view, to get on the shelf of the Whisky Shop means that if you can have that, I mean, from a distillery's point of view, from a bottler's point of view, I mean, when you think about it, if I'm an indie bottler and I've got 200 odd bottles of something, by the time I spread that through every whisky shop, maybe just every whisky shop in Scotland, you can probably get rid of quite a lot of that stock.
Yeah.
But never mind the whole of the UK. Two things. Number one, great way to be able to offload your stock. But number two, to be associated with the whisky shop selling your brand, then it means that it'd be a huge sort of thing to be able to puff the chest out and shout about.
Yeah, I think so. I think I think at the moment now that agreement with Hunter Lang is no longer in place. Obviously, they're focusing on Ardnahoe now. We are definitely, I think, looking for any and all single casks, anything that anyone's willing to give us. The thing is that because we have so many shops, we need the whole cask. It's not worth it for us to take a case of a cask that's then going to go somewhere else.
I mean, it is. And for people listening back home, you'll hear that the music is just about to start. The warm up is happening. We have the musicians next door, which is great, and hopefully they're going to actually do a little performance for us at some point. Between we talk to them every time. They're happy. They're going to maybe try and.
They want to do a Whiskey Stories tasting and concert.
Yeah, great. What a thing to be able to do.
Cool, yeah.
That's it. I
Right,
don't play the
so
fiddle.
I'm going to put you both in the spot here. Now you don't have to answer immediately, but if you were to describe each other as a dram. So you maybe don't.
Let Tom go first, because that's funnier.
Let's see Tom really start to square this one.
I mean, I'm. No.
Don't look for clues in the eyes.
No, I'm not looking. No, it's.
This is great. For people who haven't watched our YouTube channel, check this video just to see how comfortable the two of them are.
Yeah,
honestly.
also, on the Facebook page this Friday, we should do the describe your partner or your current partner, what dram your current partner will do to that as well.
Oh, Jesus. I mean, I would say that she's definitely something in a Sauterne cask, because she's so sweet.
Good.
God, that was awful. No, I mean, you know, she's peated and wine casky. She's sweet and fiery. So.
Nice, that's a good answer.
Sweet and smoking.
That's better than fiery.
Fiery.
There you go.
Actually, the more you think of calling your fiancée fiery,
So what you're saying is she packs a punch.
I mean, God, she can though.
Okay, so something from Isla, so some kind of port shot.
I'm gonna say one of those intense Octomores.
Nice.
Sure.
Yeah.
Take it. I'll take that.
Yeah.
That was quite a good answer, actually.
Thank you.
I don't know.
Go on, name an Australian whiskey just
Yeah,
because
come
it's
on.
funny.
Yeah.
the Starward ginger beer.
Oh, I love it. I love it.
Couldn't even be the unexpected.
Brilliant. So at the time then, so you guys have obviously met working in the shop.
Yeah.
And so
Who chased each other? Who chased who?
So,
We know the answer to that.
yeah. Monique was completely oblivious to my flirting.
Yeah, we're not sure if it's because he's really bad at flirting
Or
or
Monique's
if I'm just
oblivious.
really oblivious.
Yeah. It's probably both.
Hey, have you tried this whiskey? It's really fiery.
I knew I got the phrasing wrong. Yes, no. So we met while Monique was on her student visa. Over Fringe, she was able to work a bit of additional hours according to the visa restrictions.
Yeah.
So over Fringe, she worked for a week. And so I had a whole week of being able to work with her and thoroughly enjoyed my time.
Brilliant.
She was one of my favorite co-workers just to have a bit of a chat with.
He would steal my lines for whiskey bottles.
Oh
though.
yeah, no,
Like-
because I was still learning at the time, and it was very much a level of Monique knows what she's talking about. I'll listen to her and parrot that to the customers.
The audacity.
Yeah, Monique took that as an insult instead of.
And then so they end up making this massive transfer in whiskey retail and making it to Cadenheads. Was that a direct move for the whiskey shop?
No, so I interimed at Johnny Walker Princess Street.
Oh,
wow.
I did know
So that would have been, so, I mean,
Oh, I
how
did
long's
know
Johnny
that.
Walker Princess Street been open
They've now been open 3 years.
So if you've... so it's-
I was there at the beginning.
Wow,
Yeah.
how was that like then?
Whiskey shop to Diageo during COVID. I've heard that.
It was a big change.
Yeah.
So Johnny Walker is, I mean, look, it's a fantastic place, and the team is brilliant. It was very, I think they were kind of working as they went. So they're trying to sort of figure out. Diageo don't do a lot of whiskey retail, so
Right.
having a ginormous shop at the bottom of the building.
And was that where you worked in the shop?
It was, yeah.
Yeah.
So trying to work
Just
out.
selling green label to
Essentially.
Like, don't try that.
This is the one. But no, essentially trying to work out the sort of kinks as they went,
Yeah.
which was great fun. And I mean, I've got some lifelong friends out of Johnny Walker.
Yeah.
It was
And to be
an
part of that.
experience. It
To
was
be
an
part of
experience.
that, you know, but I mean, it's actually something, Ross, on the
It was a massive
podcast.
moment for Edinburgh.
Yeah, it's
It
huge.
is,
I mean, I
yeah.
remember the discussion. So my cousin, he works sort of in Edinburgh, sort of property and stuff like that, and he was sort of explaining because it was the old Burton's building, and he was explaining that the old Burton's building's been bought, and he was saying that they reckon it's going to be the Johnny Walker experience. And one of the things they talked about was, and I think we've mentioned it before, is he was saying that, you know, they were looking at it saying, you go to Amsterdam, you've got the Heineken experience,
Yeah.
you go to Dublin, you've got the Guinness experience, and you've got all these different places that have experiences, and then you come to Edinburgh, and now of course you had the Scotch whisky experience, don't get me wrong,
Yeah.
but at the same time, no dedicated brand, and there's no bigger whiskey brand in the
Yeah.
world than Johnny Walker, a walking
No,
man.
exactly.
absolutely, and I mean, realistically, there's you can kind of, the further you get into the industry, the easier it is to sort of poo-poo on Diageo a bit and Johnny Walker in general, but realistically, it was a massive boon for the industry and for Edinburgh. It was a huge gamble at the end of the day, and I mean it's 3 years open now, and they've just welcomed their millionth visitor, and
Yeah, something like that.
you know they're doing very well. Getting in at the beginning, I think, was a very interesting experience. To see
Growing pains,
to
yeah.
see how it developed through that initial phase, but it was not quite the whiskey focus that I wanted it to be.
Yeah,
So
that's
that was why after I'd been there for close to a year, it was I wanted to get back towards something more like the Whisky Shop was, which is chats with people about whiskey who are interested in whiskey. And are willing to listen to me talk.
So what? When you talk about, we were mentioning earlier on, like the
Graham's taking it back by just how loud and proud our fiddlers are today.
They're ruining the levels.
in terms of shut up. in terms of the like the canters we talked about,
Yeah.
you like Johnny Walker splattered all over absolutely everything. So what kind of things are we selling?
At Johnny Walker.
Yeah,
so
I mean,
generally,
obviously you've got the whiskies, you've got the casks, you've got all that. But tell me what is the most.
You're not wearing the socks, sorry.
Oh no, I'm not. Are you?
No.
Oh what?
Oh, am I?
Oh yeah, you are. You're wearing the Johnny Walker socks.
Johnny Walker underwear.
Yeah, Johnny Walker socks.
Socks.
Also, there you go, the striding man.
There, yeah.
Although I
They're
can't.
so bad.
I can't actually mention those because they never went for sale because they were terrible quality.
So
It was.
If anyone from the Andrew is listening, we are still listening for
Sponsorship.
The things that did go for sale are amazing quality. The shop itself has obviously a lot of Johnny Walker. They've got all of Diageo's single malt brands as well.
Yeah.
And they do various merchandise. So a lot of the sort of bits and pieces, glassware, barware, accessories.
Equal, my bad.
That was not equal.
What about in there? I'm actually going to sniff it, score at that.
Oh, all right.
Later on. But I mean, so when I'm looking for Diageo, I mean, we've reached out to on a serious note.
I guess you mean.
We've reached out to quite a few, people on the podcast that have come on, and Scotch Malt Whisky Society and Shan. Big shout to Shan Buchan. She answered the call. She heard us saying anyone from the Scotch Malt Whisky Society, if we can get put in touch, she's put us in touch with somebody from there. So we're looking at trying to do that. But I know that when you work for a company like Diageo, it's difficult because there's so much you've got to be careful about coming on this podcast. Correct. But at the same time, I mean, I think when you look at what that Johnny Walker experience has done in Edinburgh, the success that it's brought, and it really opened my mind up doing this podcast when you think to yourself, like the Scotch whisky industry, like any other business, any other industry, and I look at Talisker on Sky and then Tornavig being opened up, and everybody on Sky, including Talisker, so they say, and everyone's saying it's great, it's good for the industry. Yeah. And then you've got the Scotch Malt Whisky Society, the Scotch Whisky Experience, and you must have thought, oh my god, Johnny Walker experience is opening up. But again, they're like, no, it's brilliant because if somebody enjoys that, then they'll say, oh, we can do this as well. I mean, I don't know, maybe it was they decided to up their game, they got rid of the barrel ride.
To do a more the sensory experience, very Diageo-led focus.
But at the same time, like it's great. So I mean, that must mean such a difference working for one, a big retailer, which we are, but then to step into Diageo style retail.
The corporate world is hard. Again, I guess I made the same move as Tom essentially. I was
going to say you were at Glenkinchie.
I went from the Whisky Shop, then to the Bon Model, and then was with Diageo Glenkinchie.
Because you built Glenkinchie, didn't you?
I did 1824.
Yeah.
Bricks and mortar.
And you know that Woody knocked a wall down at Glenkinchie when he worked there?
Did he really?
There you go. Whiskey Stories, podcast knowledge.
I guess I actually built the Milton distillery because it was founded Milton.
Right, there you go. 9.9 on your snippet story.
Anyway, you end up you're looking for something new. You know you still want to work in whiskey. You've now been in whiskey for essentially 3 years. Through COVID.
Basically, so it was very good timing for me that I was looking for something a little bit more whiskey focused, and a job came up at Cadenheads for assistant manager, and so went for it, interviewed with them. I don't know if you guys have met many people from Campbelltown, but they are some of the most chilled people you'll ever have an interview with in your life.
Did you have an interview down in Campbelltown?
No, sadly. It was a Zoom call, and then they happened to be coming up to Edinburgh anyway. So
who have we had on that went for an interview?
We did have somebody who went to Campbelltown to interview.
They did it overnight, and then they turned up for an interview like, oh, did you enjoy your Chinese last night?
Because how small the place is.
There is one takeaway in Campbelltown.
Sorry?
Was it Ali Baxter?
I think it was Ali Baxter, He interviewed down in Campbelltown.
So I'll take a...
The initial conversation had been that I might have to go down to Campbelltown.
And
they would have paid for me to get there to interview for a job I wasn't guaranteed.
Well, tell us about Cadenheads then.
But also, so you're a Cadenheads retail assistant manager in Edinburgh.
In Edinburgh, yes. Yeah. So...
it's been mentioned on the podcast before. In a lot of people's whiskies, what do you Drams?
Recently, we've had a couple
we've never really went back into it. So for people that are listening, of course, we're lucky. Probably half the listeners are industry based, but for people that don't know, and for our American listeners and such, what is Cadenheads? So should I be saying Cadenheads?
I mean, honestly, I think it depends entirely on your accent. I tend to say Cadenheads, but then if I'm chatting to a Scot, I'll turn it into Caden.
Well, I'd always said Cadenheads, and I was told, It's Cadenheads.
I think
Who told you that? Mark Thompson or you? Or you?
Probably Cam.
Cameron, you.
I think so we were founded in Aberdeen. I think in Aberdeen it's Cadden.
That makes sense.
But no, so we're Scotland's oldest independent bottler. So we were founded in 1842, and we buy casks of spirit from anyone and everyone.
Amazing.
We were initially based in Aberdeen, and then in the 70s we were bought over by J&A Mitchell, who owned Springbank and Glengyle, in case anybody who's unaware. And since the 70s, we've been based in Campbelltown, where we share our warehousing with the distilleries. And we've got the shop in Campbelltown, shop in Edinburgh, and we also have a shop in London.
London as well?
Yeah.
Where about in London?
Chiltern Street, near Soho.
Right, no.
So, busy part of town.
And of course, your bottles are quite unique, and they're sort of like, I mean, if I was to describe them, and it's not a particular, like coffin style bottles.
Yeah,
if you know what I mean,
don't get used to the coffin style bottles. I'm not saying anything more about that,
Right,
but don't get used to it.
Great.
What we mentioned a lot of the time on Cadenheads when people are referencing the history of Speyside is that they will still name all their Speyside distilleries Glenlivet
That's right.
X. So that's why I recently gifted you a bottle of Cadenheads.
You did, a Milton Duff.
A
Milton Duff Glenlivet.
So
Yeah.
I knew Milton Duff means a lot to you. I bought that Cadenheads. It's the first Cadenheads bottle I ever bought in 2018. It's a 10-year-old Milton Duff in a bourbon barrel. And yeah, Glenlivet, Milton Duff.
Yeah.
We've discussed that in the podcast.
Well, if I could be in the sort of spirit of openness and honesty on the podcast, and I'm going to try and find this
you tell me
bottle.
it was Pesh.
No, no, not that. But my wife, or as Angus being
Your
current wife, she is my wife. I love her to bits. She's absolutely. I mean, the fact that I've got an 8-week-old baby in the house and she's still happy for me on a Tuesday night to come to the pub and talk about whiskey and it's work. But basically, bless her. There was one day I'm trying to find a photo of it. She went away to work and she works down at down Whitman Royal Mile, very close to Cadenheads. And she's come in, and this is before we started the Whisky Stories podcast. She knew I liked whiskey, and she's come in with a Cadenheads bottle. So I've got you a wee bottle like that. And I went, where did you get that? And she said, I got it in the shop down in the Royal Mile. Which shop? She went, I said, it'll be one of those touristy ones. And she's like, the guy served me, it was really, really nice. He told me, like, I told him that you liked your whiskey. I didn't know too much about what you liked. I was like, like that, right? And I said, how much did you pay for it? She's like, it was 60 odd quid. It's like, oh, God, what are you doing?
You're the
like,
worst, aren't you?
And I thought, like, appreciate the gesture and very nice, thank you very much. And at that time, Independent Bottler, I was talking
you
about
had
this.
no idea, right? You were
Indie Bottlers made no sense to me.
Yeah.
you were only drinking Scottish whiskey.
Cadenheads, I didn't know who they were,
Yeah.
and I was like, it's probably just, look, these, and I kind of
You-
sat down, I was like,
in your
listen.
head, you think this is for tourist rip-off?
Yeah.
I sat down,
You
listen,
didn't realise actually it's more whiskey people that buy this.
100%, and I'm trying to find the box. 'Cause
I would love to know which one it
I
is.
sent it to very early on, I put it in our group chat, and I think you were like, that's actually no bad, like,
Oh, was that another one? I'm a sad bee. I'm like, wow, that's really cool.
that's not a bad bottle. I'm going to try and find it. I will try and find it. I'm not being rude on my phone.
No,
but
no.
I felt terrible. And then of course you start learning. We do the podcast and stuff like that. And this is like it's really interesting with the two of you is as we've kind of already discussed. It's like the Whisky Shop stands out. There'll be so many people, especially I know now where Cadenheads is. I know what the shop looks like, the exterior of it. I know that. I mean, we had Mark Davidson on the podcast not long ago, and he was talking about how, you know, I don't know if it's still the same, but like a written ledger.
Not anymore. No, we've updated
the
slightly.
floppy disk, so you don't have it floppy.
Yeah. We somehow decided that in the 21st century, God knows, that we should probably have a till system.
And that's the thing.
I even remember when you took over, it was pretty old school. I
It
remember,
was.
I remember coming in to see you to congratulate you on your job, and
Yeah.
you were writing with a pencil and some kind of pad names and numbers of people. Because Cadenheads, again, because it's such a long and established bottler, you obviously had a lot of lists of people who would always buy X Springbank when they came out and all that. And obviously that's become an issue for you. Because for people that don't know, Cadenheads, yes, they're the oldest independent bottler, but yeah, that overlap you mentioned with Springbank and Glengyle, people are
Yeah,
crazy
it's
for these Campbelltown facilities.
Springbank releases may or may not be our least favourite time of the year, but it's only because we're known to have a bigger allocation than a lot of retailers, and because of that, I think we get a lot more requests than.
And that
a
must
lot
be
of
difficult
retailers.
because, like, I remember speaking to the guys at Royal Mile and Dougie Liddell and stuff, and it's like, how do you keep everybody happy?
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
you'll have
There is
loads
no
of
way.
you'll have loads and loads of people who are regulars that you know, likes a Springbank.
Yeah.
We're going to keep some aside, but then at the same time, if someone comes in and says, I want to buy 8 bottles of your Springbank, how do you
Well,
say?
they can't.
No.
So I mean, look, even core range we have to limit now. If somebody comes in for a 10 or a 15, if we've got it, you can have one or the other.
Really?
We just can't. Unfortunately, supply is so limited, and in order to try and be fair to as many people
Fascinating.
as
I
possible,
love
we
that.
just can't.
Yeah,
That's
I'll
such
tell you-
different problems.
I'll tell you a
It's-
funny, nothing to do with whiskey, but
Okay.
this guy, God rest his soul, he's dead now, Alan Donaldson.
Oh,
His name
good
is
start.
Dodo.
You said this is funny.
He used to get called Dodo, right? Dodo, Alan Donaldson, he was bare his 50s, 40s, 50s. When I was 18, 19, whilst you were cutting your teeth at the Whisky Shop, I was working at Curry's in Kirkcaldy.
Okay.
Right, Curry's electronics retailer, for anyone listening doesn't know who they are. And it was the Wii Fit, right?
Oh god.
Right? And
Yeah.
it was like, we were getting 6 at a time in the build up to
Right.
Christmas. Now, at the time, and this will age how long ago it was, and I don't know if you guys will even been in the UK or know it, JGB Sports was sports shop, were just along the road from us. We got 6 Wii Fits in. 3 members of staff took 3 of them, right? One each, because they were like, I'm going to take that for the kids and what have you. So 3 left, gone within minutes, eh? Right, one day, so Alan Donaldson, God, he's dead, God rest his soul, lovely, lovely guy. Type of guy that before the day before the Christmas party, young girl who works there jumps out Santa hat on, Alan, are you coming in? He was such a droll guy. Alan, are you coming to the Christmas night? No. Why not? I have to work with you. Beeps every day of the week. Why the hell would I want to socialise with you? That was the kind of, but he was such a nice guy, lovely, lovely guy. It doesn't sound it, but he really was hard to go. But he was just so droll, had this really dry. So anyway, this guy has come in. Dad, slightly rotund kind of person, a large guy. He's come in, sweating, red in the face, like, have you got any of these Nintendo Wii Fit things? And Alan Donaldson said, nah, sorry, pal, I was sold out. Oh, you're joking. Nah, I sold out, all gone today. And then Alan Donaldson looked him up and down and said, see if I was you, pal, wouldn't you waste your money on a Wii Fit and get down the road to JGB, get yourself a pair of trainers and go for a job. Genuinely, never made sort of customer service through the roof. But, but I mean, it must be really difficult, because if someone's waving a wad of cash in front of you and saying, look, I'm happy to take as many of these as possible, you've just got to be, no,
Here's
sorry.
the thing, Graham. Springbanks are always going to sell it.
Yeah.
I imagine the frustrating. Sorry.
No.
I imagine the frustrating thing is that you have a shelf full of really interesting products. You got the authentic collection there. You got some really unusual distilleries maybe they've not had a go before. Maybe some really interesting bottlings that most Springbank drinkers would enjoy. And you come to pop the head in, you got your Springbank, you're all sold out. Close the door.
Yeah.
And that's like you're just.
I mean, it is one of those things. There's no talking to some of them, right? If you don't have Springbank, they're uninterested.
Yeah.
Which is, we've got a range that we call the original collection, which is small batch, single malted, 46%. Everybody hates them because they're 46%, and Springbank's 46%. You love Springbank, but our range at 46%, you don't like.
That's not what I'm used to here.
So, is there an etiquette with retailers, right? So, if I was to get hold of some of this Springbank, right, and then not sell it at the time that everyone else is selling it, and then wait 3 or 4 weeks, 5, 6
Some
weeks,
retailers will do that, not the good guys.
and then stick it on the shelves, but maybe pump it up a little bit in RRP, is that really bad?
That's
retail?
awful pattern.
Really
But
bad.
also, just nobody that's going to drink the Springbank is going to buy it at that point. Like, it's.
So this is the problem. Even the core range was going for double money on auction.
Well, this is the next thing.
And it's that looking at it going, it's a 10-year-old whiskey. It's a good whiskey. It's fine, but it's worth the £52 that it should cost. If it's more than 52 quid,
Springbank, sniff it, sip it, score it. Sorry, not Sniffers. What 3 Drams?
George Keeble, I think,
Yeah.
the best 10.
Springbank 10.
Yeah, that's he.
I said Aaron 10, but I get the
And you know, I'd
Springbank
never,
10.
again, my whiskey knowledge, and like I said, no apologies for it in that sense. That it's just never ever tried it.
No.
Never heard about, really, never known the fuss. And then you dive in, and there's a Springbank obsession.
You realise it's a fetish.
So
You're like, I'm missing out here. Everybody else is
There was a
missing
very
out.
good long
Springbank.
period there where I utterly detested Springbank,
Really?
and I'll say that quite happily. It's when I was
There's
at
a
the
hook line
when
on a YouTube video. I utterly
I won't take it that bad. I won't take it that bad.
when I was at the Whisky Shop, I mean this was one of the things that I think a lot of us sort of connected on.
People
Was
would come in and ask
Hey.
me.
Yeah.
And we went, what's wrong with Glen Scotia?
Yeah.
You can get Glen Scotia and it's brilliant.
You love Glen Scotia.
I love Glen
All of this
Scotia.
actually brought me back a memory of actually first. So I remember first meeting Monique and being terrified. Like,
Yeah.
what do you mean you drink alcohol?
Quite fiery.
That is.
But then I remember meeting Tom and having a discussion about whiskey, and I was really into Glen Scotia, and it was like, no way, me too.
Oh, really?
And
That was a
again,
great impersonation.
Let's be jet. Let's be.
In terms of,
yeah.
I mean, in terms of Campbelltown distilleries, because I mean, my history, our head of research isn't here, I guess, but am I right in saying that Campbelltown was thriving, like for the size of place?
It was the whiskey capital of the world in the early 1900s. There were 37 distilleries.
And it's not a big place.
Oh, it's tiny.
It's
It's
the size of
half the size of this pub. It's you know.
sharing
it's-
staff, like the Stillman.
Yeah.
If you weren't a fisherman, you were a
And
Stillman.
then so
Yeah.
nowadays we're talking what Springbank and
Well, there's
Glen
three
Scotia.
there's 3 now and there's 4 coming up.
Right, so there's
so
a bit of a
it's-
resurgence
yeah.
coming into
Yeah.
that.
But it's only the 3 that it is now because Springbank opened Glengyle to maintain the Campbelltown whiskey region.
Right.
So their argument at the time, they were going to lose Campbelltown's region status, and their argument at the time was, well, the Lowlands only has 3 distilleries. So if we opened a 3rd distillery, will that make us a whiskey region? And it
Wow.
was considered by the SWA to be appropriate, so they opened Glengyle. So you know, it's there are a lot of things that make people want to love Springbank,
Yeah.
and their whiskey's great. Yeah, it is.
But I on that though, I think talking about how difficult it is to get things like Springbank, because we get people asking us all the time coming in, and usually it's the same. No, sorry, we don't have it. And sometimes if I'm feeling bitter, I'll go try Cadenheads. They might have it.
Just clarify, not feeling bitter with me. Just to clarify that.
No, of course not. Never.
So I mean,
I'm kidding. I'm kidding.
I mean,
But that's obviously kind of what we would call it's not a problem really. It's great for Scottish whisky doing so well. Tell me about some of the highlights of Cadenheads, your time there, and some of the liquids you've tasted.
I mean,
and also
yeah.
you're not just whiskey bottlers.
No, so Cadenheads, we bottle spirit. So basically, we'll buy anything and everything from anywhere around the world. So international whiskies, we do a lot of rum, cognacs, cachaça, anything. So yeah, we do gin. We've done Calvados, all sorts of really weird and wonderful things. I mean, it's one of those going from the Whisky Shop to Johnny Walker and then coming across to Cadenheads back into a very small scale, very niche product. I mean, it's been some of the best chats I've ever had with people, with customers in general who are interested in whiskey, talking to them about our history, about whiskey in general, and about, I mean, arguably, not to say that we're too cheap, but we are too cheap for what we sell.
Yeah.
We've got a lot of infrastructure that's been paid for decades ago. We do everything by hand, so
The advantage of being the oldest bottler is the portfolio of casks that you have.
Exactly.
I mean, that must be another thing. I mean, the inventory that you
Well,
guys must have.
This is the thing. Every now and again, I get a quick little look in at the occasional thing that I know that we've still got access to, and some of the casks are mind.
I mean, we're talking about they bottled a 29-year-old single cask Ardbeg in the last couple of years.
Yeah.
That's bonkers.
Now,
If
what's really interesting-
If Ardbeg were bottling a 29-year-old single cask of Ardbeg, it would cost you all of your mother's limbs.
Yeah.
It would just, it would be, it would honestly.
It is one of my. I'm going to start using that though.
Yeah, that's just.
It is.
Cadenheads would charge maybe 400 or 500 quid or whatever it was at the time.
It's £1,000. My
Basically, your
favorite.
mum's legs.
My favorite comparison is our little mill. We have literally one bottle left of, but it's a 31-year-old single cask little mill that's 795 pounds, which when we released that a few years ago was groundbreaking, too expensive. Cadenheads have lost their minds. But you compare that to a 31-year-old single cask little mill from any other bottler, and we're £1,000 too cheap.
Yeah.
Well, this leads on to an interesting point then, because the two situations that you guys find yourself in now. One of the things that there's a lot of chat in the whiskey industry right now. I'm going to try and sound like we know what we're talking about here, but like
it's what I do on a daily basis.
There's a lot of chat going around about. I mean, there's always peaks and troughs when it comes to whiskey, and I think people are starting to recognise: are we heading into a trough? Are we in the trough? Or where are we at the moment in the whiskey industry? I spoke to somebody who's quite senior in the whiskey industry, said, look, I've been in the
Thanks very much. Yeah.
Aye, well, he did work on the door at the whiskey shop. He said, I've worked in whiskey for 20 odd years, over 20 years, and he said, what I'll tell you is that the whiskey industry only has good times and very good times.
Yeah.
And he said, so basically, when everyone's starting to panic a little bit and talk about, oh my god, we're seeing a downturn, maybe we're just in the good times instead of actually in the very good times, where maybe over the COVID period there was a spike in sales, purchases, what have you. But what is very noticeable from a consumer's point of view is that distilleries, whiskey is becoming very expensive.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there's a lot of new distilleries.
Yeah. So one of the things is now, of course, every distiller, every bottler, everyone will tell you, but everything price is going up.
Yeah.
Cost to heat the place, cost to staff, X, Y, and Z. So from your perspective then, you're talking about you with a little mill and you're saying, we've probably not charged anywhere near enough in some people's eyes for what we're putting out. Whereas, Monique, you're dictated by what the distilleries are actually telling you. It says that RRP, this is what we want.
Absolutely.
I think the benefit that we've got being owned by J&A Mitchell, J&A Mitchell's principle has always been that they'll never produce more than we'll sell, and they'll never overcharge for what it costs to make.
Yeah.
So it's the reason that one of the reasons that Springbank's so sought after and so well respected is because the quality's always maintained, but the price has roughly stayed sort of, the same. I think the 10-year-old's gone up 10 quid in the last 10 years or something. And we benefit from that as well. We're never going to overcharge if it means that it won't sell, because a product sitting on a shelf when we've got cases of it out the back is a useless thing for us to have.
It's just cash sitting there and burning away.
We might as well have left it in the cask and let it mature for another few years if we were going to do that.
Because then from a bottler's point of view, I suppose if you always follow, and that's really interesting with having a back catalogue of aged stock, is if you, and this is very, very rough maths and not maths based on any kind of information I've got or anything like that, but if you were to say, for argument's sake, to put that in glass and to sell it, it's got to be a 30%, we've got to make 30% on top of the cask cost. Mm-hmm. But then if you suddenly say, when was that 29-year-old Ardbeg bought?
Yeah.
And what did you actually pay for it at the time? Which means that you suddenly go, it's easy to add 30% on, it's still only cost your mum's legs and arms.
And I think this is one of those levels of we've got the space to buy young. So if we can, we'll buy young. Which obviously means that the cask cost us next to nothing. Yeah. Which means, there's the cost of maintaining a cask over X number of years, but are we benefiting that much by charging £1,000 when we could charge 500 and it'll sell out? If £1,000 is going to sit on the shelf and not do anything, but 500 quid will sell out and we've already made our money back, then I'm not at that point in the business. That's not my
of course.
It's
an interesting conversation, because as you're saying, holding true to those values in the sense of saying, right, I tell you what we could do is like, we bought this cask for X amount, and now 30% means that we can sell it at this, but we could add another 20% on top of that and we'd still be making...
And market value as well, and you're still looking at it going, well, even with all that, we're still under market value of what X, Y, or Z could be.
It makes it incredibly hard, because then you go back to... Well, we were working at the Whisky Shop, and we all love Talisker 18, and everybody's been buying Talisker 18 forever, and they come in and say, I'll have a Talisker 18 like I did last month, and now it's £170. And it was £65 before that or whatever. There's nothing you can do about it. But the advantage of Cadenheads is, yes, it's whisky retail, but really it is just a storefront of your own product.
Oh, exactly.
So it's almost two completely different worlds. It's just a bottler who thought ahead. And now you have amazing retail spaces to champion and to pioneer your bottlings. If you didn't have those retail spaces, maybe the Whisky Shop would be selling Cadenheads. And that would be another one of those products that people talk about on the shelf.
Well, and I think that's very much the level of what, part of the business model is going, we want to be in control of our own stuff, because then we can put it at the price that we want it to be at, and we can ensure that it's going to maintain, our sort of values at X, Y, and Z.
Really is.
It's a very Campbelltonian way of thinking.
It brings it Paul Main, who we had on the podcast not that long ago, and he was actually from Underlying, and he was the first one to. It was. I always get the pronunciation wrong. It was Cadenheads Leipzig. Well, 24.
I'm just going to say it differently.
Leipzig. You're not going to do it in case Mark Thompson and Cameron...
Leipzig's what I would say.
But he was a Cadenheads 24 Leipzig was what one of the first proper whiskies that really opened his mind. But fascinatingly, Dave Worthington, Batiki Dave, and their stories were almost identical. And it was genuinely fascinating in the sense that, so Paul Main, without having to repeat the story word for word sort of thing, but basically Paul Main had a colleague who was a big whiskey drinker. His story, I think, if I remember saying it rightly, he said, his colleague said, we'll go for a nice big walk on a winter's day, big huge walk, and then they came back, big mug of tea, fry up, and then he said, you like your whiskies? Paul wasn't really big on his whiskies. He said, try this, Cadenheads Leipzig 24. Now, that's a big entry level dram to be having, and he said, blew my mind. Dave Worthington was saying it was his supervisor or something at work would always bring a bottle in Christmas time or something like that, and he brought in a Colila 1991. Hey, something like they're big entry level drams to be giving somebody, but fascinatingly, both number one in their What 3 drams, and both the
speaks to the quality of the bottle.
Well, that's exactly it. But what's interesting here then, between the two of you, is the clientele that are coming through the door. Now, we've already mentioned, Monique, you do have a lot of people that will come in for repeat business. But when you look at percentages wise, there'll be a lot of people that come in, buy some bottles and never come back. Whereas, Tom, on your front, I'd imagine it's probably the other way around. You'll probably have a real sort of, not clique, but like almost like a little sort of...
people coming out turn day kind of thing.
Group of people that know I go and get my whiskey from.
Yeah, very much. We've got a lot of repeat business. It's,
you don't tastings and stuff as
well? At the moment, no. We used to host tastings in the store. Now we're actually working with predominantly the Belfry. So Rory from Ensign's and the Belfry. So we do tastings with him now. The license, we refurbed the shop in January of last year, and the licensing changed, and which meant that we have to update the layout of the shop and X, Y, and Z. And there's the tastings in store, the way they used to run doesn't really work anymore. So we do essentially not quite every month, because we do an outturn every month, but not quite every month we'll do a tasting with either Ensign's or the Belfry.
How often do you do an outturn?
Once a month.
Jesus.
Well, on the subject of this, I mean...
That's a lot of whiskey.
Well, Grady Angus isn't here, but you have brought samples in with you.
Yes. So, I mean, I brought two, and Monique's brought two.
Brilliant.
My two, so they're actually not from our official outturns. Down in Campbelltown, if you do a warehouse tasting, they've got 6 distinct casks.
How good are you, Tom? How good are you, man?
Can't help myself, Ross. But no, they do 6 distinct casks for the warehouse tastings down there.
That's way too generous.
So one of them is a 14-year-old feta can,
I love a feta
which is
can.
everybody's favourite distillery.
Oh yeah, 1824 Eastern Highlands.
All right.
I have to let everybody know.
There's
Hey.
a lot of
Like
feature.
a book somewhere.
No, it's like
let
undiagnosed
you go,
autism.
Sure. Nah, yeah, Ross can
Get
pour
a wee
it.
photo of that, Ross, as well before we pour it.
It's
It's-
owned by slave owners historically. They
So
don't
this
talk about
is-
that. Whitman. And the master blender at Fettercairn, Greg Glass, worked at the Whisky Shop in Inverness, where he started his career.
I didn't
Take a wee
actually know
photo
that.
before you pour it. You don't mind.
This is this is one that was bottled this year. Well, wasn't. If you'd gone and done the tasting, it would have been bottled this year. But it's a 4-year finish in a Carcavelos wine
I was
cask.
going to say that it looks like Calvados but longer. So you're going to have to tell me what kind of cask it is.
Carcavelos, as far as my very arbitrary research on Wikipedia is concerned, is fortified wine from Portugal that's not port.
Okay. It smells brilliant.
It's a really interesting one. It's
Yeah.
not it's not a distillery I tend to lean towards, and it's not a there you go. It's not a wine cask I'd ever come across before. So I thought it would be a really interesting one to. I mean, didn't necessarily angle this for the podcast, but it was just to showcase to you guys, just to give you something a bit different.
And because Angus is here, we've managed to pour 2 or 3 drams. There's still plenty left in the bottle.
Exactly. Sure. And so while we're enjoying these samples, let's talk a little bit more about you being a whiskey couple then. So you meet each other at the Whisky Shop.
Yeah.
Do you make the decision, right, so I'm going to go to Johnny Walker and that way we're going to see each other at home and at work. It's not going to be too bad. We eliminate with each other at that point.
We were actually, yeah.
Yeah,
So
just,
we started dating while we were still both working at the Whiskey Shop.
And Monique's like, I can't
We
do
were
this.
so
No,
sad.
basically, yeah. It was like she caused a global pandemic so that we didn't have to.
Well, it actually was it was something I was very stressed about like 7 months in advance, where we were planning on going to Canada, and I was like, oh, we're gonna have to ask for the same time off, and like, oh
How are
my
we gonna-
god,
It's a good
how are we
point.
gonna
That's-
swing it?
So
So-
hilariously, and I think the
So I
ridiculous
caused the
thing is
pandemic,
the ridiculous thing was is that we weren't worried. Yeah, go for it. I'll just share yours. We weren't worried about it work-wise necessarily. It was purely we just thought it would be awkward for our co-workers if they knew we were dating.
Yeah.
So we thought, to save face.
As far as I'm aware, there was no rule against.
No, well, that would have been
In
weird if
the
there
UK,
was.
there's very rarely that.
Right.
That's very rarely a thing.
But so we just thought in order to make it less awkward for everyone, we won't tell anyone that we're dating, which
Yeah.
made it really fucking awkward for us.
Yeah, I think we thought we were super subtle.
Yeah.
I mean, I had no clue. I remember seeing it on Instagram being like, no way!
We actually came into the Balmoral. Do you remember?
Oh, really?
It's one of my favorite whiskey stories, actually.
Oh, yeah?
I mean, you did treat us like royalty.
Good,
Of course.
good, of course.
Yeah. We were sat at the bar getting poured
Yeah,
drams that
some
we'd
really
requested and
interesting
paid for.
stuff.
Yeah, and it was.
Having a thought-provoking experience.
It really
Yeah,
was,
but
I
did you
remember
not
getting
realize?
I must have.
I mean-
Ross just said,
no,
these guys are great. They work together. I think we're drink together.
No, never asked me to go out for a
That's really
drink.
nice.
That's probably what I was
Really
saying.
nice that they hold hands.
That's what I'm thinking.
Just sharing a co-worker kiss.
We're talking about a guy that was on his way to Isla before he found out he was actually going to Isla.
I was on the ferry and heard the time I said we were arriving in Port Ellen, and I said, Port Ellen's on Isla. I was like, I'm on the boat. I generally had no idea.
Wow.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
horrible.
Okay.
So-
So you're not reliable either.
I will say this Fettercairn is lovely. So your whiskey tastes are similar, quite different.
They're probably more different now than they actually were.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I
That's
think
probably true.
when we first
Yeah.
started dating, I think we both agreed on we didn't like big sherry casks, and we thought that we both kind of agreed that peated whiskey was very interesting. But I think at the time we were like, like Andy liking Glenlossie in a bourbon cask. We were like, it tastes of nothing though. What is this?
Yeah.
Whereas now I adore.
You get the subtleties in
Yeah,
there.
I think it is very true that having a sort of positive influences of it doesn't have to be peated to have flavor. we've definitely, our palates have expanded and we've become much more well-rounded
I mean,
people
we
in general.
We both roughly like the same stuff.
Yeah.
Like you know,
generally.
our collection at home is our collection.
Yeah.
It's not just one of ours, but you know,
There is
ours put on the same
maybe
shelf.
maybe one that we disagree on quite heavily,
Oh
which is
God. There is one whiskey that Monique's decided is one of the greatest whiskeys ever bottled, and I think it tastes of absolute death.
it is objectively not the best cask, I will admit. It is quite sulfured, and it's like obviously sulfured.
What is it,
but
Ben Reef or something?
no, it's
a weird
a
Brook Laddie.
private cask, Brook Laddie,
Oh.
Reeve Salt.
I've seen a couple
yeah.
of them with the kind of blue.
Yeah, and I absolutely adore it. It's like fish sauce.
Yeah, I think I would hate that.
you,
I think I would absolutely.
Yeah,
hate
You wouldn't be able to go
you
near
would.
it.
I think you would too.
It would bring me out in a rash.
But no, I
But-
think generally.
Yeah, that one.
Generally, you're
Generally,
pretty-
yeah.
Yeah.
I think it started with both of us adoring peated whiskies, and then both of us developing thereafter.
Yeah.
I'll tell you what, we already can't wait for the Whiskey Stories episode 2 in your house with 160 bottles.
I want to need an
You know what?
MC and host for your wedding.
Oh
Ross
God!
turned us down.
Honestly,
I've never done a wedding. Welcome to the Whiskey Stories wedding.
the scariest thing about our wedding is picking the right bloody whiskies for
That
it.
is
honestly.
actually
Yeah.
that's a huge challenge.
Yeah, we're really worried about what we're going to put in the quake.
And also, you do a lot of research. I'll say that you're some of the best research friends in whiskey that I have. You're always at Ensign. You're always at Tipsy Midgie.
Yeah.
Or if you're in Diggers.
Yeah.
That's
yeah.
like 2 of the biggest open collection of whiskies in all of Edinburgh.
I mean,
Yep.
yeah, we
I like that you call it research.
Yeah.
I should tell
Yeah.
my mum that. It's
Yeah.
research.
it is
Yeah.
definitely
I
that.
tell my
I mean,
therapist
it's-
research.
I'm a
Exactly.
researcher.
We need to know. We need to make sure.
Yeah.
No, I think it's one of those. You know, we've frequented both of those, like you know, Ensign Ewart and Tipsy Midgie, and become sort of friends.
Do you live in that part of
the
town?
star. We're actually up
You live
here.
down the
Oh,
road.
really?
We're on Delray.
Yeah.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, this is our local.
Yeah. But you know, it's because we both work sort of in town.
Yeah.
You know, Ensign Ewart
It's
very
dangerously
rapidly.
easy to
Yeah.
just go, you know
An
what?
amazing team in there. So.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely, and you know, it's we sort of become friends with the team in there to the point that you know when we go in, they're kind of provided the staff are not brand new and they recognise us,
Yeah.
they kind of go, well, this is new and this is
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
haven't tried this before.
Provided it's not heaving busy.
Well, there,
Yes.
yes,
We're
obviously.
not
Yeah.
dicks.
'Cause it's a wee pub as well. People haven't been to the Ensign Ewart, right up by the castle. You'd think no Scottish or you think none of us would go in. You think it would just be tourism, but they've got an amazing whiskey selection. They're very fair with the prices, especially when you think of the location.
Yeah.
Yeah,
My
absolutely.
head boy actually works there, Oisin Strachan. He was my head boy at school.
Was he?
Yeah,
There you
nice
go.
lads, really nice lads.
Yeah, so the Dunbar sort of mafia and whiskey.
Yeah.
But he went to done marine biology, and then he was great. He was a really smart lad. And I said, "Oh, what are you doing here?" He said, "Well, I've done marine biology, so I can't find a job really." It's not really me. So, but ended up in Ensign. Just a lovely, lovely human.
Yeah.
And Rory and the boys up there do a great job.
I think they're very fair for where they are and for what they
They're
do.
too fair almost.
It's honestly, I mean, they do 35mm measures. They're on par price wise with Diggers, and they're on the mile. You know, and it's a really quaint.
Is that where we ended up at the end towards the end of your stag do?
So I'm told.
I
Fair
believe there was a photo taken outside it. I
Ah.
think Angus and I went in. Greg Urquhart. We had a couple. I said, I think it's time.
Yeah.
It's time. Time for home.
I
And I think you were out till long into the evening.
I was.
I've seen
That was
I've
a
seen the team at Ensign's kick people out before. I imagine that wasn't pretty.
No, it wouldn't have been me, because we would have went in half pissed and asked for what cheat brew you got or something. Trying to try the interesting stuff when your palate's
The
already
Milton
gone.
Duff, I think I ended up getting.
Yeah, but a really good pub also had an interesting
Yeah.
break
Yeah.
even as well. So
Yeah,
Right.
yeah,
Now,
absolutely.
So that's
In the
all
honour
right,
of
all right.
fairness, Monique, you've brought in a couple of samples.
Yeah.
I would
Chef's Kit was very good.
probably start with that one.
Yeah, so the I brought in so one of the things I didn't say with the Whisky Shop is we have a sister shop, and in many ways they're sort of like Cadenheads, in that they are an independent bottler in their own right, and
Yes.
they have a shop They happen to have a shop in Edinburgh.
Was Lockfine?
Yes.
Oh,
So
okay.
a shop in Edinburgh and a shop in Inverary, but they are sister shop, Lockfine, an independent bottler. So I brought along a Altmore 15-year-old,
Wow.
which I brought with you in mind.
Okay.
It is.
I should probably point out as well, I wrote on the label Big Fat Sherry.
Yeah.
That's only because when I asked Monique what the cast type was, she said, "Oh, I don't know, Big Fat Sherry."
I love that. Here's the thing as well. So Graham, I gave you a lot of abuse this year about being a sherry
That's
tart.
dark, that.
When I
Are
started
you
in
as
whiskey,
well? Then?
Yeah.
Yeah.
when I started in whiskey, I was
Ross was
absolutely
the
a
sherry
Yeah,
tart.
yeah, well, I mean, I've done myself. I mean,
Ross was the only person I knew who liked Glendronach 18 at the time.
yeah.
And
We-
also,
Glendronach Allardyce,
and I
whenever you're
love
watching the
Allardyce.
Drams.
and you are, I think, the only person that I've ever met that actually recreationally drinks sherry.
As an 18 or 19-year-old, I used to drink. And
No, you did
he
it.
actually
See,
did.
I
did
hate
it.
the amount of drinking.
Oh,
So I want to
God.
clarify. I've given.
Ross is the
I've
oldest.
given-
He's the oldest soul I've ever
I
met.
have- oh,
So you would have
dear.
been 19 or 20 years
Yeah.
old,
I
ordering
can't-
that
I can't-
sherry.
No. I buy
God.
actually it's worse. I buy bottles of sherry, and so
Alright.
so I can't believe that's happened. I've given my colleague Graham and the head of research a lot of stick for going to fee-paying schools when they were young, which isn't their fault.
You ran this risk when you invited us on, man. I
We
can't.
know
forgot
all your
I
dirty
went through a
secrets.
period of drinking 30-year-old Pedro having his sherry
Oh,
in my
Ross,
bedroom as a
you
19-year-old.
little tart. You little tart.
Yeah.
But I got labelled. Like, Ross sat in this very room.
Yeah.
And I went, you eat sherry tart that you are. Called me a sherry tart.
I know.
And I've had strangers, total strangers, obviously friends of the podcast, I should say. Hello to all these people who listened to it, but somebody, I can't remember who it was, they were listening, and I wish I could go back.
Came up to you.
And no, it was on our weekend dram roll call.
Somebody just tagged
So
you and
it's
said
not-
you're a sherry tart.
Someone went, perfect for someone like you, Graham, you sherry tart. I was like,
Oh, you
wow.
can flip that back straight onto Ross.
Yeah, when I
I
was
want this on
younger, it
record.
certainly was the case that I had a slight sherry fixation.
Slight.
But again, I was learning. I was learning.
And all-
There's no right or wrong with what you enjoy,
and,
Ross.
and
But
here's the thing, I've come full circle, the Cody Reynolds circle, and I'm now more like Andy there, so he's a Glenlossie, and I've always been a manic whore for
yeah,
manic more.
That's what I should have brought.
that's I know. To be fair,
And now, so what about Glenbergie and Milton Duff and Glen
Oh.
Talkers and Manicore? All what I would have called bland, forgettable whiskies when I was
Yeah.
18, 19 is what I found most interesting.
Fascinating.
But I think that's all.
Well, my Altmore, I mean,
Smells
fascinating is.
beefy.
Like, so, I mean, Altmore, what's this? Is this an Altmore
So, yes.
15?
15,
So
yeah.
that's fascinating. We've had an Altmore 16 Tricara brought their Altmore 16 in
Lovely.
for a taste,
Ah.
and we had an
Yeah, we've
Altmore
had that
11.
one, yeah.
Finn Thompson gave us the Altmore 11 that he'd had, which was a really interesting whiskey that night because that was finished.
Do you know, Big Fat
Forest,
Sherry
right.
is the perfect note.
you know, there's
It's like leather.
Yeah.
It's really, I love that.
It's like
we've
savoury,
got we've got a big fat sherry Milton Duff at work at
Oh,
the
yeah.
moment, and I hate how much I love it.
Yeah.
It's so good. It's 4-year finish in the
It's like a
freshest
handbag.
PX cask.
Isn't that good? It's like leather and mahogany.
That's
And
lovely.
it's intense.
And
and
at
rich.
61.1%.
Oh yeah, I probably should have said
And
it's not
Oh, it drinks.
small.
No,
And do you
that's.
know, and it drinks well, and the Fettercairn also drinks really well at 54%. Altmore's a distillery that probably most listeners won't know that much about as well, but really, really interesting distillery.
Yeah.
And normally bottled in bourbon.
Well,
Yeah.
I've got a gift. Well, I've been waiting to open this. We will open it. We'll wait till our drams are finished. But I can put a 10-year connection here.
Ooh,
There's a Ballantine's Gold Seal 12-year-old
I can see the 10-year
Special
connection.
Reserve Scotch Whisky. Ballantine's. I found this at the back. So basically, over the last 2 or 3 years, every time I've gone to my mum and dad's house, I've tried to raid something out of the. With the fact that between the family connection and whiskey with my mum and when my dad worked for Ballantine's and what have you, and my grandparents drinking a lot of whiskey, I've always and basically I think this is the last thing I found. A tiny little miniature, but and Ross has got a job to do tomorrow when he goes into
Golden
Bevy.
Seal. Have you searched it?
Bevy HQ because it's not available on it's not available on Bevy,
Oh dear.
which tells me that this is quite a rare. It's
1980s certainly.
it's a 50ml bottle, yeah. And if it's a 1980s, as we've said, this would have been at the time when Ballantine's was owned by Hiram Walker.
Awesome.
We're a Canadian
Yes,
whiskey company.
yes, indeed. Yes,
Good
indeed.
Canadian whiskey company?
Yeah,
There you
good
go.
Canadian whiskey. Well, gotta be. Yeah.
There you go. So Hannah Walker. So what we'll do is
lovely.
we'll crack this open. We'll obviously wait, but at the we are now fast approaching our What 3 Drams feature. Now, as a couple, we always offer couples the chance to do 3 each. Is this what you're wanting to do?
Very much so, I think.
Right. Or you could do 2 each and share one if you want.
Oh,
No,
no.
let's have 6. I want 6.
Right, okay, let's have 6, you
It's
said.
going to have to be 3 each.
Right.
So we'll start with.
Start
Monique.
with
Go
Monique.
one each and then keep going.
Oh,
back
yeah,
forward.
okay.
Do one each,
Yeah,
Monique.
crack on, yeah.
Are these ranked?
No. This is any whiskies,
Just
any
3.
stories,
Just
any
3.
3 stories
But
that
you
you've
can,
got.
you can save your most emotional to last if you want, you know.
Oh,
Don't
okay.
do
Well, okay. Yeah, maybe I'll start. I'll do it in chronological order.
Okay.
So I think for my first, I would say the Lefroy
Musicians are
PX
killing me here.
cask.
Sorry, sorry. One more time. The musicians are killing you. It's Lafroy
The
PX.
Lefroy PX cask. That was probably the first proper bottle of whiskey that I bought, and sort of in a sad way, it was after I finished my masters in 2015, and I was moving back to Canada, so I bought it at the duty free. As a sort of
I just
panic.
want to interrupt here and just say that 2 days beforehand she bought a Cadenheads, but that is not one of her whiskies. So
There you go.
Dear me. Lafroy PX to the bottle
No.
you're taking back to Canada.
Yeah, no, I did. Yes, it's true. I did buy the Cadenheads, but for a long time, because it was in a bourbon cask. After I actually tasted it, I was like, "This is terrible," and I didn't like it. Now I do like it. But I digress.
sorry.
Yeah, I had actually a list. I knew exactly what I wanted to buy, and I think I was probably quite snobby to the poor woman at Gatwick Airport. But she was like, "Oh, well, like, you know, you like that? Okay, well, maybe." And she gave me a sample and was like pretty much what I do now. Maybe try this. This is something different, and you can only get this at airports. And I was like, "Oh, and it's a liter bottle. Okay."
Very Scottish.
Happy days.
Yeah, well, you know, yeah, there's a lot of
Value for
connections. Scots in Canada, it's tight connections.
And which part of Canada is it you're from?
I'm from sort of just outside Toronto originally, but I lived in Toronto for about 10 years. So
And so Lafroy's the distillery you've always enjoyed as well.
Lefroy is certainly, as I said, like I started out with the peated whiskies, and that was sort of my love. And I went to Isla 2 days before I flew home.
Oh, that's
I
amazing.
went to Isla for about 22 hours and just walked to the distilleries.
Brilliant.
Took the bus and had the bus driver laugh at me when I was like, "Oh, can you just drop me off at Kalila?" And he was like, "It's up the hill." why were you waiting here? So after that I walked, but yeah, I think I spent the longest at Lafroy, and they were absolutely awesome.
Amazing.
And just gave me tons of drams while I
That's
was
how you
waiting.
get
You know,
those
I-
memories,
Yeah.
isn't it? Visiting
Yeah.
distilleries.
I think that's
Yeah.
the first
Lafroy.
Lafroy.
Are
I
you
think that's the
kidding?
first
Wow.
Lafroy.
Yeah.
We've had 2 Lagavulin 16s back to back. We've had
53
the Ardbeg
episodes.
Oogie Boogie, which was Wiki Elliott. And interestingly, I'd be interested, and again,
Lafroy gets mentioned all the time for the one that scared people off. Jodie
But-
Buchan, for
yeah,
example. And
but I'm fascinated by this, and again, I like to try and find connections and what have you. But I think from our What 3 Drams point of view, and I actually, do you know something? I need to sit down and actually put together like a proper spreadsheet with it
Spreadsheet,
all.
yeah.
But I would probably go with that. We've probably had more smoky peated whiskey on a What 3 Drams coming from female
Yeah.
guests than we've
Honestly-
had coming from male
Yeah.
guests, which is
Honestly,
very
I
interesting.
see it all the time. Like when I'm
Yeah.
doing sampling for people in the shop, and we've got, so with our casks, we always have at least one peated whiskey.
Yeah.
And the amount of times that there are men that are like, "Oh no, I can't," and the women are just stood there going, "Oh, this is actually quite nice." And
Yeah,
it
something about
happens
that. It's
all the
fascinating.
time.
I think it's one of my favourite and least favourite things at the same time, which was when I was working with you, but also now, is people coming in going, "I want a whiskey for a woman,"
yeah.
and I'm like, "Well, my fiance / girlfriend / co-worker at the time, depending on when it was, loves peated whiskey.
Yeah.
Does that count?
Yeah, because I mean,
Because you felt inclined, if I was ever working with Monique and somebody said, I'm just like, well, you're good.
Yeah,
that's the interesting thing. If someone was to say to you, like,
Yeah,
what would that, and that, it's a really interesting thing, is what would because it was interesting actually, here's the thing, really close family friend, I've known her son since we were at nursery together, parents are very good friends, they were out on Friday night, I was with them, and her name's Myrid. She grew up 2 minutes away from Bowmore Distillery,
Wow.
to the
Brilliant.
point of her mother had the Bowmore Hotel,
Wow.
used to run it, and basically, and interestingly, you know, she was talking about Fagila and she was talking about the boom in Isla whiskey and what have you. Isla whiskey was always a big thing.
Yeah.
I mean, you talk about when her son was born, they were able to easily buy casks of Bowmore for that, but because they knew the distillery manager would sit in the bar pretty much 2 or 3 times a week, sort of thing. But it fascinating was, I asked her if she's.
You were born in the wrong generation.
Oh yeah, and I said to her, I said, right, I went away and got some whiskies for the group, and I said, right, Myra, do you want a dram? I said, what is a girl for Isla? What dram would you go to? I said, Jura. I said, really? It says, Jura was seen as the ladies' dram.
No way.
Yeah, so an Isla, it was like, it would be seen, I think what she was sort of referring to was like traditionally, the ladies on Isla would drink Jura and what have you. But I mean, if someone was to say, get me a whiskey that a woman would drink,
Yeah,
bear in
well,
mind,
Emma Walker's massive blender of the fucking Johnny Walker portfolio, like it's so. But you're right. 20 years ago, that was maybe a considerate question to ask.
Yeah, absolutely.
right, Tom,
It's definitely
Yes.
changed.
dram number 1 for you.
So I've back and forthed on this, but I think hilariously dram number 1 is going to be Johnny Walker Black Label.
Fine.
Lot name label.
Because for my 18th birthday, one of my best friends, who is actually one of my groomsmen, bought me a bottle of Johnny Walker Black Label. And this was at a time when I knew nothing about whiskey other than you shoot it and you feel awful. And it was one of the first whiskeys that I ever went, well, you've got to drink it properly. So obviously poured it over a massive block of ice,
Nice.
and thought that it tasted
call. That's a
absolutely
Foster's
awful.
Some Fosters to chase.
But I think he's since then proceeded to actually buy me a couple over the years. So for a few of my big milestone birthdays, he'd buy me a bottle of Johnny Walker
Amazing.
Black Label,
Amazing.
and it sort of became a staple in what before I moved here. It became a staple in what was my sort of tiny collection of whiskey, and to the point that actually when Monique and I were at the Balmoral and the night that you were serving us, I got into quite an argument with an American that you had behind the bar. Not behind the bar, sorry, at the bar, because he told me that if he bought me a dram of Black Label, that even if it was free, I would spit it out. And my argument to him was that if they bottled Black Label at cask strength or high strength, it would be probably the best whiskey ever bottled. And so he bought me a dram of Black Label, which you tried to stop him from doing, Ross. Because I think you were trying to be a responsible bartender at the time. But I very happily enjoyed a free dram of Black Label, can it?
It's fascinating. I mean, Angus Shepherd, our missing host of the Whiskey Johnny Walker Black Label, his story was he had just got engaged with his current wife. Now, well, it's at the time current girlfriend, then current fiance, now current wife. He's in Japan with, and he said the only was it Skiros island they were in, or they were on an island in Greece, and then the only bottle they could get was Johnny Walker Black, and they said, you know what, we sat that night on the balcony, just been engaged, and we enjoyed this. And fascinatingly, he kept it a secret, the sly bugger that he is. Because remember, I don't think I waited till you'd left. He was very quick to say, I can't do this week, Thursday, Friday or Saturday, categorically. And he was very cagey about it. And I just said for a joke, I said,
But you're getting married.
you're getting married, eh? And he went, and I went, no way. please don't tell anyone, please don't tell anyone. Lauren and I are just getting a quiet, private thing, whatever, and they did their recipe thing. I said, like, well, if you're... So we did a recording on the Wednesday instead, and we did the recording, and then I thought, right, so I think you've left, and I said, right, Angus and I will have a nice wee dram together, two old pals sort of thing, and I thought, I'll get your drams, Angus, no bother. And I went to the bar, and I says, Dom, was it? I can't remember who was behind the bar here. Johnny Walker Black Label, please, too. I think we have it. 850 open bottles of whiskey. And then I went, you're joking? And they went, hang on, we'll have to find it. We must have a Black Label somewhere. And they were looking everywhere, couldn't find it. I ordered 2 Glenfiddich 21s or something like that for us to enjoy. And then, after I bloody spent all that money, 2 Glenfiddich 21s, blows the dust off this Black Label. But interestingly, again, another 10 years connection on that is one of the only other Australian guests that we've had on, Simon Smith, sat in the exact same seat that you're sitting in and argued there is, in terms of the best whiskey in the world, Johnny Walker Black Label has to be cost, production, sales across the world, and consistency. You cannot say that Johnny Walker Black Label is not one of the best whiskies in the world.
Johnny Walker Black in the house.
See, my hilarious thing with that is that I don't.
But
we did.
Yes, but we did. When I worked at Johnny Walker, when I worked at Johnny Walker, we often had a bottle of Johnny Walker Black. But I just think, like I said, I mean, at the strength it's at in the market that it's in, it is unbeatable. But if they bottled it at cask strength, I don't know if much could compete with it.
Yeah,
and I
get it.
It's great.
Yeah.
Good dram, really good dram.
Yeah.
Monique, what's your second dram?
So on the opposite end of the spectrum, and this was actually at the Ensign Ewart. I don't know what made us pick it.
I think it was either the break-even dram or it was the one that they gave us a discount on.
I don't know, but it was.
I think it was new.
It was a new bottle they had behind the bar, but it was an old particular bottling of Port Dundas 13-year-old bourbon cask. And I think I'd always heard, grain whiskey is only good when it's older, it has to be at least 20, all this stuff. And I have certainly had grain whiskeys that are younger and are quite astringent, but this Port Dundas was gorgeous.
And what age was that, sorry?
Sorry?
What age did you say that was?
13.
It
was
interesting.
Perfect. Beautiful.
So that was a vintage bottling they've obviously bought in.
No, well, Port Dundas only closed in, 2012?
2000. Oh, now you're testing me.
Early 2000s, I
In
thought.
the early 2000s.
2012 or 2011, I think. So
2011.
2011. So not that old. So it was obviously.
It was at the time a new bottling of Old Particular.
Yeah, it wasn't old.
So I think it was a 2009 vintage. So
we'd have to check. I don't know.
Anyway,
I don't remember, but it was just absolutely gorgeous and a perfect dram. Creamy, light, delicate, beautiful.
Yeah.
And absolutely devastating because Port Dundas are closed, and it is one of my favorite distilleries, if not my favorite distillery.
I think
now
that dram
because of that dram.
I think that dram rapidly turned it into your favorite or one of your favorite distilleries.
Yeah, and we have been on a hunt for a bottle ever since.
So that I've since bought a different Old Particular Port Dundas for Monique, but it's the wrong cask. And it's similar. It's very clearly a sister cask. There's a lot of the same characteristics, but it's not quite the same magic.
Yeah.
And there's something nice about that, romantic about that as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Once it's gone, and you enjoy it while you've got it. I think that's one of the most important things.
Single cask whiskey is who you drink it with, isn't it? It's the story. And
it's very much.
Yeah, and that was the two of us together. But there is beautiful but tragic, and I love it.
There you go. Right, Tom.
So I think my second one's probably the first whiskey trip that I ever took, and it was the first trip that we did together. So this was in November of 2019.
When we'd been dating for
a couple of months.
6 weeks.
Yeah, if that. Yeah, we'd been dating for a few weeks, and we decided that the most sensible thing to do would be to go down to Campbelltown. But at the time, we didn't give a crap about Springbank, and it was only Glen Scotia. We organised to do, or Monique organised, to do a warehouse tasting down in Glen Scotia in November. And there wasn't a soul in Campbelltown. It was just the two of us. It depends on the cask number. Sorry.
There was multiple.
So there wasn't a soul in Campbelltown. It was the two of us in Glen Scotia. It was my first distillery tour ever. And I remember, because it was quite funny at the time, we were working in the industry, and the lady running the tour was like, do you have any questions about anything? And I was looking at it going, I don't understand what I'm looking at. I know all the terminology, but I have no idea. Like, what's a mash tun?
Yeah.
So I was wildly out of my depth. But we ended up in the warehouse tasting, and there was a 19-year-old single cask, ex-bourbon barrel, unpeated Glen Scotia. And I think it completely blew my mind. Because, again, it was one of those, it was, who I was with, the trip we were on, but it was so bright and fresh, and it was really creamy, really orchard fruity, and there was just toffee everywhere.
Yeah.
And it was, mid 50% ABV, unpeated Glen Scotia. I'd never come across anything like it. Because up to that point, the only experience I'd had was Glen Scotia 15, which I adored, and Glen Scotia Victoriana, which I thought was one of the best things that had ever been bottled. But then experiencing a completely different side of the distillery.
It's a cask sample.
Yeah.
Yeah, they never bottled it.
And it was...
I think we were, by the end of that, probably drunk enough that if they had put a number in front of us, we would have said yes.
Really?
So...
Like they lost out.
I mean, my favorite part of that entire trip, my favorite part of the entire trip was when we were after the warehouse tasting in the distillery shop.
Nothing better.
And I was running around like a bloody headless chicken, and Monique was stood there trying to hold a sort of coherent conversation with the girl, and I ran over, and they had a little cask end that they had clearly, for their display, burned with the words with the letters Glen Scotia, and had it as a display. And I went, "How much is that?" And she went, "Oh, I don't know. I'll charge you however much it costs for a cheese board." I went, "Cool, whatever. I want it." So she took what was clearly just part of the display out, charged us money for it, and that is now sat proudly above our fireplace.
Lovely.
They've not replaced it.
No, they haven't. When we went in the next... when we've been back every other time, there's no cask end with Glen Scotia.
Have you got any chance?
You've got that.
Yeah,
Got that now. Cheese board. Price of cheese board.
That's right.
Right, ready? Dram 3.
So I did swither on this quite a bit, but I have to go the kind of wanky route and say that if this was an old bottling, it was a sample bottle of a Gordon MacPhail Talisker 21-year-old, but it was distilled in 1947.
Whoa. There's a flex.
Yes.
Oh yeah, boy.
I hate people saying stuff like Black Label, by the way.
we spoke about this ad nauseum because Monique didn't want to come across like a whiskey wanker.
No,
I didn't, and I'm gonna anyway.
Don't worry. I think on the first episode, one of them said bells, one of them said grouse, so I said Balvenie 30 or something like that.
But well, I mean, that is a flex.
So Gordon MacPhail, 21-year-old, 1947.
What I will say is, every time this happens, you'll see Ross when we're doing our 3 drams, and we are now available to be followed, I believe, on the Berry app. Ross is checking on the Berry app to find all the information. If you want to see the information that we're talking about, whiskies we're talking about.
I mean, this stuff. The thing interesting stuff about this kind of whiskey is it's not necessarily the oldest whiskey that could be ruined and overcooked. That's a generation of whiskey where the distillation was just different.
So different.
1947 Gordon MacPhail, bottled at 21, could be a really balanced, interesting whiskey.
It was,
and that to me is way more thought provoking.
Yeah.
So what was the whiskey like?
And that's absolutely what you're saying. Like the fact that it's like this is something from a completely different generation. It is a snapshot in time, really. And it was, I mean, if you're familiar with Talisker now, you get all these like spicy, like moderate peat spice and like a little bit more caramel, sweeter notes. This was orange blossoms and there was a bit of spice, but it was rounded, it was soft, and it was super interesting.
Wow. It had obviously been sat in a bottle for a while as well, so
there was
they're arguably slightly flatter than it might
Now,
have
am I
been.
right in saying then, right, so distilled in 1947, which means bottled in 1968.
Yeah.
Great maths. But basically it's like, so yes, someone's made a decision in 1968. Stick that in glass, by the way, because that tastes bloody good.
Yeah.
All right,
And
then you wonder.
They would never had a single thought that Monique would have got to try it.
And 1968, fast forward to when was that you tried that?
Last year?
That would have been in 2022.
Oh, it was too. It was before we went to Canada.
Yeah. So, unfortunately, I thought I was going to be like daughter of the century award because my father loves Talisker, and I'm definitely going to fling him under the bus here. I brought the like dregs of the little like 5 cl bottle that we had, and I brought that to Canada for him, and like was delicately shaking out the last droplet into a glass for him, and I was like, oh, here you go, you know, like look at this amazing thing, like how awesome is my job, which absolutely it is.
So how did you come across it, sorry?
It was a sample that was given to the Whisky Shop as maybe you might want to stock this, and we didn't.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Oh,
So
yeah, okay.
So your dad, so you're giving this to your old man.
Yeah.
And he's going, where's the rest of it?
Well,
No, not
he
quite.
didn't say that, but he knocked it back.
Ah, no.
Not
He just
even a moment
shot
of
it.
consideration, and I just felt
I
my
think both of
soul
us.
plummet out of my
46
body.
years on from when that was bottled.
The both of us, I think, almost had a heart attack
Yeah.
at that moment. I've just
Yeah.
gone, wait, enjoy it though.
Just chucked it
yeah.
back,
Yeah.
and I think, like, you probably could have seen like the light shining out of my eyes as it was like, oh my
Yeah.
god.
Wow.
So never again.
No.
Never ever.
No, he's lost all
ever
privileges.
again. But I think that was just like such an amazing moment.
75 years on from distillation. Like just
Yeah, so.
Yeah. And he just went,
It's all-
and he just
it's
went,
all-
oh
I mean,
yeah.
It's all there,
we've
isn't
got
it?
lots
Yeah.
of time, but you could talk about that. I mean, the sense that like single malt wasn't really a big thing. So at the
No,
time
it
in
wasn't.
1968,
Yeah.
someone's going,
Incredible.
the Gordon MacPhail or Independent Bottlers are creating this, and it's a
Yeah.
a 21-year-old Talisker at the time. Wow,
Yeah, absolutely incredible. But yeah, he didn't care at all.
There you go.
Yeah.
Big shout out to your dad.
Yeah, apparently this is just a regular, occurrence for him.
Please don't put orange juice in it. I'll make this in a gladiator.
I think I would have probably, I would have probably killed him, but
Yeah.
I would have stopped that
Yeah.
for sure. But I think that was just one of those things of how else, like whatever
great
situation.
story.
Brilliant.
Great story, great dram.
Right, Tom.
So my last one is actually probably the most meaningful, and this was actually influenced by you telling me to leave the most meaningful for last. No, it's hilariously, it's my favorite distillery. It is an Etrusk 7-year-old. So just bringing us back down to earth slightly.
Never had enough of us.
We won't. No, sorry, how'd you go?
Bit fucking rude. So it's a Hepburn's Choice.
First edition? Burns choice.
It is absolutely piss clear.
Refill bourbon.
Refill hogshead. It tastes of absolutely nothing. The reason that it's as important to me, or one of my stories, is because when I first moved to Scotland, my parents happened to be in Scotland at the same time as I decided to move here.
Okay.
So we met up. They'd been up in the Highlands. We met up in Edinburgh. And they gifted me my first bottle of whiskey after having moved to Scotland. That is it. That is the piss clear Etrusk that it is.
I think there's actually, I believe that's on the shelf.
Where?
Here.
Here.
Kidding.
I think that's on the shelf here.
I'd buy a dram of that.
I've got a sip it, score it.
Oh, I tell you what, I'll be biased.
1,000 out of 10.
Yeah. So I had never seen a whiskey that colour in my life. Up until the point that I'd moved here, my entire experience with whiskey was Johnny Walker, Bowmore, and Glenfiddich. And I had no idea that whiskey wasn't a brown liquid.
Yeah.
And it blew my mind. So not only was it obviously the sentimental value of my parents gifting it to me as my first dram here, but I'd never experienced anything like it. It's light, it's orchard fruits, it tasted like raspberry jam on a what's the word I'm looking for?
An oat cake?
No,
A
it's
stale
not an oat
piece of
cake.
bread?
Just stale piece of bread.
There's a wanky tasting note right there.
Isn't it? But
I love it.
I've become obsessed with the Thrusk because of
That's
that dram.
really interesting.
Deeply
It is my
obsessed.
favourite distillery. I've now had the oldest Thrusk that's ever been bottled because I'm so obsessed
Brilliant.
with
Your
that.
favourite distillery.
I visited the distillery and I've been through it unlike many other people.
Credit to Andy at the Whisky Shop. Liking
Yeah.
a Thrush distillery is way worse than Glenmorangie.
Isn't it? No,
I love
isn't
that.
it?
I
Fair
absolutely
play.
love
Now,
that.
we've not got very long. Now,
Sorry.
What we're going to do is we're going to play a little game of Mr. and Mrs. to finish this off, right?
Oh, is this like the
Now,
newlywed game?
What we're going to do, I'm going to give you a countdown from 3, and the two of you are going to say 1 dram, right? 1 dram, and if the pair of you get it spot on, you get to tell the story. If you don't, we'll just do it, right? So 1 dram between the two of you. That's a what 3 drams for you guys as a couple.
You have a whiskey that means
Right, 1 dram. You can't confer. You can't look at each other. You can't do anything. Right? Are you ready? You just got to shout it.
my mind is
Right,
blank.
right. Wait. Okay then. What I will say is, like I say, the Whiskey Stories podcast. We are, keep up to date on what we're doing, everything we're thinking about. Thinking about. Everything we're doing right now, you'll find us on Instagram. Don't forget to join the Whiskey Stories Facebook group. He's got one, right? You can't do it, right? Don't forget to join the Whiskey group. Like and share it. Thank you so much for everyone listening. Right, are you ready? You've got to shout out 1 dram.
You think that it's a story
A
that
distillery,
it's
it just can just be the distillery or whatever, right?
I don't
3, 2, 1, go.
Inchgower 29.
Inchgower 29,
Right,
Bowmore 15.
There you go.
God
And do
damn
you
it.
know immediately what the story is of each other's dram there?
I was.
Bonus content. Thanks for listening.
Worth mentioning that Tom is doing November.
Tom
as
is,
well.
I mean,
Sorry.
And so
Yes.
this is going to come out.
By the time this podcast comes out,
afterwards.
Tom will have a handlebar moustache. Right now, he looks like the
Guaranteed.
And so, but by the time this comes out, Tom will probably come into the Facebook group and post his magnificent moustache.
Tom, is there anywhere that you're raising money?
I am, yes.
Right.
I'm raising it for Movember.
Brilliant.
So Men's Health.
How can people find out about both of you?
You can Google Movember.
Yeah.
It's November with an M.
Yeah.
Or you can visit me. I am mini.mott
Right.
on Instagram, and I'm all over that.
And Ross is doing Movember, but in January he's going to call it Fanuary.
That's it.
Excellent.
Very good. And Monique, how do people find you online?
I have an Instagram that I've neglected for several years that I am trying to get back into called Weird and Wonderful Whiskies. But also Monique.DePace on Instagram. That's me.
Brilliant.
That's
Wow.
my sort of mainstay.
Great episode.
Thank you so much for you guys coming on. Honestly, thank you to the musicians next door for making it such a lovely atmosphere, and great. Thanks to everybody for listening. This is episode 53. We kind of have to start again. It's episode 1 of the next year of the Whiskey Stories podcast.
Ooh.
Whiskey Stories Facebook group, get on it. It's well worth it. We're now over 100 members. Weekend Dram roll call, brilliant. We had a JML Laird
Whoever this guy is.
posted a picture of a distillery from a hill and just said, I'm out for a walk in the middle of Speyside.
What is
What
this
is this
distillery?
distillery?
Yeah.
Fantastic!
That
is
Mystery
that.
distillery,
I love
we've
that.
got loads and loads of different things going on.
And I
The-
guessed incorrectly. But
We've
we've
even
never
got-
heard of the distillery, I guess, and that's what that Facebook group's all
Exactly. And
about.
we've even got like a live auction going on for Ben Riach 25-year-old.
for a good cause.
For a good cause, for the British Heart Foundation. George Drummond's doing that. There is loads going on in that Facebook group. It's a very, very active Facebook group. You can find us on Instagram, Whisky Stories Pod, Instagram. The YouTube channel is live. We've got over 30 videos of us talking to guests on it. We've got about 50 subscribers. Let's get that pushed as well. Snippet Score It. We're TikTokers, Ross.
So I played football on Monday, and somebody who I don't know, I play football, playing football Monday, said, "I seen you on my TikTok."
We're TikTok
And I
sensations.
said, "What?" And he said, "You're like a memory box for your knowledge." And I said, "I think I'm talking pish most of the time."
Snippet Score It. 60-second whisky reviews. Get on it. And as I say, we have now we have set up an account on the very app, where all the whiskey that we talk about on this podcast, the What 3 Drams, everything like that, we will put it up there. Follow us on that, because I believe there is a follow feature, Ross, that not many people know about.
I'm working on it.
Right, hurry up, Ross.
Right.
But follow us on that, you'll find everything out you need to know. Thank you so much, Tom and Monique, for coming on.
Thank
you
you
for the
so
drams
much
as well.
for having us.
Brilliant. Thanks to the Fiddlers Next Door. Thanks to the Athletic Arms for having us. I guess if you're listening, you've missed a belter of a podcast. Hope you enjoyed Japan.
We're safe in Japan.
Cheers, guys. All the best.
Cheers.
Cheers.